Hello, everyone, and welcome back to I Love You Tea with Trashellie, not sponsored by Yui Hirahara. I just want to say we have a lot of new people who have found this podcast recently and are joining us. So, first, welcome. Thank you for tuning in and subscribing, or if you're hanging out in our Discord channel with us right now, thanks for hanging out with us. This is a little podcast that we record in our I Love You Discord server pretty much every other Friday. This is a space where we like to kind of connect some of the broader threads in I Love You and talk through some of the things that don't come out as well in writings. And you can find us on both YouTube and Spotify, and you can find some clips of our podcast on TikTok. I'm Elle.
And I'm Ashley.
And tonight we're going to be kind of talking about some of the different goals and motivations that our characters have, where they stemmed from, what their possible outcomes are and their needs are, and kind of how these goals sometimes tie together and play out for our characters or might play out.
If you're reading I Love You and the recent chapter left you blue, or feeling like it's too good to be true, we get together and share our theory, bend down and praise the almighty Quimchi. Come join us for tea with Trashellie.
Yeah, we're going to keep this one kind of based on individual characters, so we're kind of just going to be diving into the characters a little bit. This is something that we've kind of done throughout a lot of our episodes already, where we'll talk a lot about characters in terms of what their motivations are, why they're, what compels them, why do they act the way that they do. But we've never really done it in a way that concentrates it in one particular episode that we can refer people to, or in, like one kind of situation where it's all in one place. So we'll be doing what I think is probably going to be 2 episodes where we kind of go through a lot of our main supporting characters and just kind of talk about those compelling factors, not just about their own situations, but even kind of like how that plays into the plot and affects, the other characters around them.
Yeah, and so something that we kind of talk about a lot in I Love You is the disconnect between a character's goal and their needs, and like how they got to those goals, and what are the possibilities for if they succeed at these goals or if they fail at these goals, and what they would actually need to, I guess, be successful in like what we perceive as their need. Because I mean, like we're not kimchi, we can't know for sure, but we can certainly speculate based on how we see them. And so,
Right.
and so I think tonight we're starting with the main girl herself, Shin-Ae.
Yeah.
And
And kind of like how, like you were saying, Elle, how that kind of disconnect between what they want and the goal and the needs that aren't being met, and how that drives plot, because ultimately that is the main compelling factor of the story is ultimately that these characters have needs that aren't being met, and so much of the story is their struggle either to meet it or the result of it not being met. So for Shin-Ae, her goals are very, very obvious to us, both through what she conveys to us and the ways that she responds to conflict throughout the story. We know for a fact that she craves stability, she craves autonomy, she wants so badly to not feel like she's a burden, and she really, really craves connection. She's got a lot of abandonment issues, and as a result, she really craves, not just like feeling wanted, but like I'm trying to think of like how you would phrase this, but basically she doesn't want to feel abandoned, like I think there's something very specific in not just wanting to be wanted, but wanting to know that you're not being abandoned, and that's something that's very big in her interactions with Nol. It's not enough to know that you're important to him. It's, to know that she's not being thrown away. It's to know that she matters and she has an actual active role in his life, you know?
To that kind of like to be let in. And we saw with her thing with Maya and Rika that like she like on some level she knew that they were there for her. Like she knew that they weren't going to turn around and throw her under the bus. Like she wasn't really afraid of that, but she could tell that there was that like emotional intimacy lacking, and she wasn't comfortable opening up that door first because every time she has, like you said, like she's been abandoned and thrown away. So she really craves somebody else showing her that like they want to be open to her and they want to be connected to her. And like you said, that they won't abandon her, and having that emotional intimacy that like she tried so hard to have with Alyssa back in middle school, but like was shut out of, but that she was like more so able to find in Minhyuk. And like I always can like contrast the way that her relationship with Alyssa developed and ended to the way that her relationship with Minhyuk had, because I think that has a really strong impact on how she continued to operate around her relationships, where like I said, like like through she was really kind of pining for Alyssa to open up and trying to figure out Alyssa and trying to pull Alyssa back in. And she could tell that Alyssa was hiding things and wasn't opening up to her, and that there was more going on than she was privy to, that she may ever become privy to. And that's the relationship that like, crashed and burned so badly and solidified all these abandonment issues for her, where like she had abandonment issues beforehand, but that was like the final nail. Whereas with
Right.
Jingle, like he more so came to her, and like he let his other friendships kind of fall so that he could be friends with her. He um was like coming and helping her and propping her up, and like op- the one more so opening that door. And like that's the friendship that she still has. That's the person that she continued to rely on. That's the person that she views as family. Whereas, we know that Alyssa is now this like well of unaddressed pain.
Right. I think basically what Shin-Ae really craves is it's both she wants reassurance, but she needs people to act on that reassurance.
Yeah.
Because that was that thing about Alyssa. She was giving her reassurance, but it was, reassurance that she wasn't acting on very well. Like, as readers, we know that she was trying to act on it, but, it wasn't coming through to Shin-Ae because to her, it was, very wishy-washy, very back and forth. Whereas Minhyuk was very direct, very assertive. And that's very much a part of her issue with Nol as well. He hasn't actually given her a lot of reassurance, I think, I always refer back to that moment when he climbs up onto the roof with her and, she gave him that opportunity to leave. And how that's part of why what they're going through right now is so difficult and painful for her. She gave him that opportunity to leave where it was like, okay, I can make my peace now. I can find some kind of closure. Obviously, she wasn't going to find the easy closure that she, tried to tell herself she was going to. But it would be a lot easier in that moment if he had taken the out that she had provided him. But he didn't. In that moment, he was reassuring her. I think that is, we talk a lot about how so much of her attraction to him starts at that time because, he's letting out that part of him that she finds so attractive, that, more dominant, assertive energy. But I think it's also partly because he was so reassuring because, that was such a vulnerable, raw moment for her. And we've talked about this before, you and I, where there is an absolute parallel to the fact that Shin-Ae has this very raw moment with him where she tells him how much he means to her. And then we get to see her entire past with Alyssa and why Nol means so much, but more importantly, what it means for him to come back to her and provide that reassurance. So I think him providing that reassurance is kind of, for her, that is a green flag. It's that go sign. And that's why I think there's so much turbulence for her right now, is it's kind of like, you gave me that reassurance. Why are you stepping back now? Because, that whole moment in the hospital room where he's like, I can't be around you, like, again, it's like very Alyssa to her. It's like, you're going back on your word. That's not what you conveyed earlier. It's not enough to reassure somebody in words. You have to do it in actions. And, we love our girl Shin-Ae, but it's very difficult to read a person when you cannot see into their mind. We can read him a lot better than she can. She's very much in the dark when it comes to this. Shin-Ae, she's somebody who needs things laid out explicitly. And I get that. I'm somebody who, I'm one of those people who, like, if I feel a shift in my friendships with people, and sometimes, the shift isn't even real. It's like, that perceived shift because, like, my own emotions are turbulent. So I'm perceiving something that's not real. And, like, logically, I'm like, this, there's nothing there. That is, like, your best friend of 10 years, be cool. But, like, I have to get that reassurance from them that, like, everything is fine. Like, so I get it. Like, sometimes you need somebody to sit here and tell you something that, like, you just need it laid out. So I get it, and I think for Shin-Ae, like, that result of abandonment, of, feeling like a burden, sometimes you just need somebody to be very upfront. And when, we've seen that in her life, she doesn't have a lot of people who have been upfront. And that's part of, like, why this is such an important goal to her. Her father has never been very upfront. And, he's one of those people who he reassures with his words, but not his actions. Her mother definitely wasn't upfront. She left her with nothing to go off of. Maya and Rika were people who reassured with words, but those actions didn't feel the same. They didn't meet her in the same way that their words were. I think Minhyuk is one of those people who was one of the only people whose words and actions lined up the way they did. And that's probably why he's one of the last people that she came around to doubting. And, that's because she was getting to that point where it's like she is literally at the end of her wire.
And, like, the words versus actions thing is, I think, especially interesting when we think about Nol, because I think Minhyuk does pretty well on both fronts, where, like, the things that he says to her, like, do often match his action. And the things that she gets frustrated tend to be when there is a disconnect, like with him, like, saying that he knows that she can handle herself and he trusts her, and then, like, going out and being, like, very overprotective brother, like, denying that those denials of her autonomy. But with Noel, like, I mean, obviously one of the big things about him is that he was outright lying to them, but in the way that he was interacting with them, it was all very genuine. Where, like, Noel is one where his actions were conveying to her, like, the real underlying of their relationship, and, like, his actual feelings and, like, his real self, where in his words he was very often trying to hide it and lie to her and, like, put on that mask and persona. And so she trusted him because she could feel that authenticity in his actions. Like you said, he can't deny her, and she makes him crumble. So he would act upon things that he didn't intend to or want to, but that were so very real for him. And his words wouldn't match up because he would try and police his words a little bit more. And so she trusted those actions because that was the genuine part. And then finding out that, like, all of these, the rest of it is where the disconnect was, which is so opposite of what she's had and everyone else in her life, is part of what set off this whole, like,
Right.
this, like, betrayal but fighting for you arc.
Right. Like, it made him very, very confusing to her, because it's, it's one thing to be able to look at the actions of a person and be like, see, this is why I trusted my instincts, because the way that this person acted was, the opposite of what they were saying. But when it's that flip flop where it's like, you say that, you don't want to be my friend, but your actions are this completely opposite thing. What are you supposed to do with that? Like, like her gut instinct is telling her that obviously that means that like these actions are the truth. But when you're so used to like the words being the actual truth, like when you're so used to it's just, yeah, like for her, it was just such a confusing situation. And that's part of why it made it so hard for her to even like understand her feelings at all, and why she's in that position where it's like hard to even acknowledge that, oh, I actually care about him, because like you're sitting here and like you can't even like get this guy to admit that like he cares about your friendship, and you need to tell yourself that you actually like him. It's like, like we talk a lot about characters like Kosuke and Alyssa having truths that they absolutely cannot face because they just cannot bear with the reality of it being real. And to some degree, that is what it is for Shin-Ae, because it's, what does it mean for it to be true that she has feelings for Nol? Like it, to some degree, it's not nearly as severe as it is in Alyssa or Kosuke's case. Oh, that was weird. In their case. But, it's still, it feels insulting, I think, because she's fighting so hard and she's got these sincere feelings. And, like her gut is telling her that he feels the same. So why is he denying it? Why is he pushing her away?
And it's like, it's such a different experience to like, again, like comparing to Alyssa, where like, that pull away was like, it was so, I don't know how best to describe it, but like
it really is just like very disconcerting compared to, like Alyssa makes sense. Maya and Rika make sense. Nol makes no sense. Like if your actions say you like me, you want to be my friend, you want to hang out, why are your words, saying something completely opposite then?
Yeah, we're like you said, like she just is so action oriented, and like you said, she can feel it. And like with these other people, she like you said, she could feel that something was wrong. And then like when the words like were pointed out as not matching up, it was like, oh well, I kind of knew it all along that there was something wrong with this. That, and she's like, I don't understand why it's wrong, but I knew that it was. And with Noel, it's like, but no, like I know that this isn't wrong, so why are you trying to say that it is?
Right. He just, yeah, he's clearly like the most confusing part of her life. Like when I feel like Shin-Ae is the character who, to me, I think makes the most sense because, on some level, I think she is very, very transparent. Especially when we think about like her goals and her needs. And what are those unmet needs? How, it's made very adamantly clear from the beginning that Shin-Ae is somebody who has always lived, or she's always struggled financially. How she's very food motivated, not because she is, a glutton, as, like her friends kind of treat her and laugh it off as, but because she's lived with that food poverty her whole life. And she's so good at hiding these things that, like the writing makes, really great comedy of it, to a point where like even readers kind of didn't pick up on it at first. But like, a lot of these aspects of her make so much sense even from the beginning, but especially as we get to know more about her, about how her mother didn't just leave, but her mother took her older sister and left, and how obviously that's like the very root of those abandonment issues. To feel like your own mother didn't want you. And growing up with that kind of poverty and food scarcity, feeling, you don't want to feel like a burden, especially when we get into understanding just how bad her middle school fall was, the kind of toll it took on them, the fact that her father was going back to school, and, there's already that schooling debt from him going back to school, and now there's medical debt, and he very likely never finished that. And so all of this mounting debt and the burdens that she feels, so much of her just lines up so perfectly. She makes so much sense on paper. So I think that's what's really fun about her relationship with Noel, is like watching how it unfolds, because I mean, it too makes sense. Like I wax poetic about Sakyo all the time, about how like everything that I love about them is, all of the in spite, but it's the way that he crashes into her life, and he, in the context of her life, makes absolutely no sense. Like this person who she wants nothing to do with, and like everything about him annoys her, and yet she's so drawn to him. And like you were saying, how there's so much authenticity between them, and that's very much that thing about them, is how they were always acting on that natural chemistry, despite, like you were saying, like the way that his words never match his actions. And that's exactly that thing about them, is like he was so authentic, and that's something that she has always craved, is just somebody who is authentic. But that's what that's what continued to make him so confusing, and such a frustrating point for her, is he feels authentic, but he doesn't speak authentically.
Yeah, and like one of the big things about Shin-Ae is that like I do think that she is generally written to be a kind of easy to read character. And that's like I always have taken it as a very intentional contrast to Kosuke and Alyssa, who, like Shin-Ae as well as Nol are like that kind of like classic physical survival, physical security. You can see pretty linearly all of the things that have gone wrong in their life. You can see what they need. Whereas with Kosuke and Alyssa, it's a lot harder because it's so much more like layered and shadowed and internal. And like I always take it as that contrast between like the like kind of the physical security and the emotional security, and like the external and the internal, which like obviously there's like layers, like all these things go together, but like on the surface level of what you can see, and how it's basically taking that like that looks can be deceiving, and like that kind of like everyone, no matter what it looks like on the outside, has their things going on that can be looked into, and that they are not that dissimilar. But I think it also helps that we see the story through her. We see through her perspective. We like follow her train of thought. And so like
because that is that thing too. It's like her friends don't see her the way that we do. Like her friends never realize the depth of her struggles. They think that their food motivated friend is just like this fun, silly little glutton, and then they finally get things in that perspective, and it kind of makes them realize that, oh, this things have been a lot worse for her than she ever let us in on. And we only know because we're the ones who are in her head.
Yeah. And like Shin-Ae's, so much of her thing is that, she closed herself off. Like she didn't let herself deal with these things. She didn't let herself open up, particularly after Alyssa. And she, like you said, like she grew up around people who weren't authentic with her. Her father kind of dances around these subjects. She never got an explanation as to what happened with her mother. She never got an explanation as to why all the other kids bullied her, because it was tied into what happened with her mother, and she really doesn't know anything about her mother. And they would insult her. They wouldn't tell her why they were insulting her. She never got closure with Alyssa. Like all these things, like she like no one has been that like open, honest, authentic with her.
And
And
they're also like really connected to like that need for authenticity and stability is and especially autonomy is very, very connected with not wanting to be a burden. That growing up with that kind of scarcity is very you're a burden, so you don't want to be. Like nobody likes that feeling. And when you're somebody who has had to lean on others and rely on others, and you know that you can't return it, in your mind, if favors are something that you have to return, you're just like racking up this debt. And we see that with Shin-Ae. Like every time somebody does something for her, it is a debt that she must return. Like Nol gave her that last taco, and she told him that she's gonna have to pay him back. Like everything for her is something that must be paid back. And that's absolutely part of that feeling like a burden.
yes. And like really like the and it, like you said, it all ties together and it all goes back. Like, the very first memory that we see of her is that their mom leaving and taking her sister with her. And there's that, like, you wanted the other one, but you didn't want me. And it's like that kind of like, it starts with that, like, what did I do wrong?
Why
That
was
you
I not good
want me?
enough?
Yeah, why was I not good enough? What did I do wrong that you didn't want me? And then immediately after that point, Simhan realistically starts struggling because he's left in the aftermath of this divorce. And then it's like, oh, she left me behind because she didn't want me. And because I am here, you can't provide for us because I am a burden. Like I am an extra person to care for, and we don't have the resources for it. And then
Right.
we get into everything else. Which I'm not going to repeat and reiterate all of it, but it stacks and it stacks and it stacks until she gets to that point where she closes off and she downplays. And like you said, the other people in the story, you know, see it. They see it as kind of exaggerated with like, like you said, like they also make jokes about her food insecurity, and they express frustration that she's closed off, and why can't she just have fun with us? Why doesn't she trust us?
and
And
and that is one of those things. Like I think that I know I've said this before, and I can't remember if I've said it on the podcast, but probably. But one of my favorite things about Shin-Ae and Maya's friendship, and especially the way that it imploded, was the fact that they are both so at fault for what happens. And like, I'm not saying at fault in a negative way. It's just, Maya wanted her so badly to treat her like a friend. She knew that Shin-Ae didn't see her as a friend. But likewise, Shin-Ae knew that Maya didn't really see her as a friend either. She knew that Maya, felt hostile towards her. She never felt welcome. But like, because Shin-Ae never made those steps, she also never made those steps. Shin-Ae doesn't want to feel like a burden, so she's definitely not going to open up to Maya, because like that's definitely going to make her feel like a burden. It's just like those layers upon layers. And like I was saying at the beginning, it's these goals and unmet needs affect not only themselves, but it's the way that it affects the relationships around them and the way that they interact with others. Like it's not that Maya and Shin-Ae were ever bad friends. It's just that they never had an actual solid beginning. They never had a genuine start to their friendship. And we've seen that they're kind of getting there, but Maya still hasn't been 100% reassuring. I mean, we've seen that they've been able to have a good start because of it, but Maya still has a little bit of that, reservation. And we'll probably see that expanded on as they get older. But that's honestly one of my favorite examples of how those unmet needs affect people. Like obviously we see a lot of that in Alyssa, because obviously like so much of Alyssa's unmet needs affect everybody around her. But like Shin-Ae and Maya, I think, are a really good innocent example of it, because it would be so easy to sit there and say Maya was a really bad friend, but it's very much a situation of like, all Maya wanted was for Shin-Ae to open up. It's just Shin-Ae never really felt comfortable because there was never that even footing for them. And, I don't know, that's like weirdly one of my favorite non-major points of I Love You, I guess. It's just, Maya being this girl who feels so sullen and jealous and kind of resentful. And I don't know, I just love it. I love it. And we'll get to that part later, so I won't dwell too much there.
And like I think also like I think it also creates like a nice little succinct example of like when your goals and your needs don't match up and can get in the way of each other. Where like Shin-Ae, like that she's trying so hard to not be a burden and she's so afraid of putting her own foot forward and opening up to people. And so that's why she doesn't open up to Maya and that's her part of putting that wall up. And then likewise for Maya, she wants to be like,
just trying to fulfill Minhyuk's requests.
Yeah, she doesn't want to disappoint Minhyuk. She wants to be accepted and acknowledged. She is like she has the reservations from not wanting to fail at those things in addition to that kind of jealousy and resentment for the fact that she doesn't feel like she has that, you know, she doesn't feel like she's being let in and acknowledged. And so that's why she isn't able to put her authentic foot forward for Shin-Ae. And like both of them would have benefited from opening up and making that connection. And both of them also had a goal of being friends, even though that goal consciously for them was slightly misguided on both ends. They had both like a conscious, slightly misguided version of it and like a genuine underlying version of it. But their other goals got in the way.
Right. Like I like that the way that you put it. Their unmet needs getting in the way of each other, because I think that very much describes a lot of the conflict that, or like a lot of the interpersonal conflict that we have. We see that even like with the little conflict that we've had between Shin-Ae and Minhyuk is, some of the only conflict that they've really had is that unmet need. Shin-Ae, and her autonomy, Minhyuk and his goals, his kind of protective / knight, role, and how that, those kind of get in the way of each other. And I think that's a really good way of looking at it.
Yeah, and I think like we see this a ton with so many of our characters. We're like, and that's the times when our characters can get so frustrating for us. We're like, we look at them and we're like, you just need this thing. And then, but they're out here, and because of what they have been denied in the past and that unmet need and how they view that unmet need, they'll go and do things that are searching for a goal that they think is going to fill it, but their method of getting there isn't actually going to fill that need.
Right. And that's like a really easy example is how for Shin-Ae, like that feeling of not wanting to be a burden for her translated to, okay, I'm not going to talk about my problems to anybody. I'm going to take all of this, I'm going to stuff it down deep down inside. Nobody's ever going to have to worry about me. But that makes people worry about you more because nobody can contain all of that. And at some point in time, it's either all going to come bursting out of you or you're going to have a breakdown. And for her, it, both things kind of happened all at the same time. And fortunately for her, she has found that it turns out that being a burden sometimes isn't a bad thing after all, because there is something wonderful in feeling cared about. I think that's one of those things that in the absence of having when I say like a solid family unit, I'm not trying to say this in the sense of all people need a mother and a father in their lives, but I am saying that, in the lack of having a present family, her father was somebody who it's very clear that they have a good relationship and they love each other a lot, but he's a very busy person, like taking more shifts at work has strained the relationship because he can't be around as much. She doesn't really have, she never really had that relationship with her mom. And she's never felt that way towards Mrs. Park. And so that feeling of people caring about you and worrying because they care, like not worrying because like they're worried about you and scared for you, but like worrying because I want to make sure you get home safe kind of worry. That's something that is like still so new and rare for her. And I think like in exploring that, unification of her family with the Parks, maybe hopefully she's going to get to indulge in that and come to understand that, hey, it turns out that sometimes being a burden isn't actually a bad thing. We actually are all meant to be burdens because that is part of being loved. Like, that's something that I personally have come around to think. Like, I don't want to always look at being a burden as a bad thing because, like, that happens. It's a thing. But, like, I love the idea of, people loving you in spite of things because that is what love is, right?
And like,
And we see that a lot with Minhyuk, you even mentioned it, how like their friendship grew like he literally stepped away from the friends that he didn't care so much about, who didn't mean as much to him, as these people started to judge him for his friendship with Shin-Ae. He came to realize that, hey, you know what, I don't care, I like you more. Did that make her a burden? To some extent, maybe yes. But did that mean it was a bad thing? No. He found that he was happier with her friendship. So I feel like, yeah, sometimes people are burdens. But the important thing is learning that it's okay to be a burden. Like, you look at a character like Nol, like Shin-Ae's going to learn this fast, as like she comes to embrace her feelings. And a character like Nol is, you're going to, find him like maybe that you feel someone like him can be a burden, but that doesn't mean that you don't care about him. That doesn't mean that you don't love him, right? And I think that's something that we're going to see explored a lot.
And it's like a while ago when we were talking about the relationship that Noel has with his friends, and we're like, he makes it like pulling teeth to care about him, but they so badly just want to return that care and care about him. And it's that concept where like she is feeling for other people that like it's okay to be cared about, and to, because we want to care about people and we want to forge those connections, and it matters. We're like, when someone is important to you, when someone matters, like you said, like being a burden is not a bad thing, because it means that you're supporting each other, and it means that you mean something to each other. And like she is very much discovering, and I think especially going to discover this through Noel. And like it's like it plays into that mirroring with them, where like they are constantly in this kind of push and pull game, but like they both still so badly want to connect with each other, because having those hardships and like having those moments and like having to kind of prop people up or pull people and like just care about them isn't a bad thing. And like again, and I know I bring in Shinlissa so much when I talk about Shin-Ae, but like going back again to that, like that's what Alyssa didn't let her do. Alyssa didn't let Shin-Ae be burdened with her problems. She
And
was
she
closed off.
tried. She tried
Yeah.
so hard. Like, she went to her house, and like there was that one moment where like, Alyssa slipped and wanted to let her. Like when Alyssa finally let her into her room, and Shin-Ae was talking about how she'll leave, and Alyssa, was like, "No, don't stay." And it's like, she's not talking to her about anything. She's not coming out of her blanket cocoon. She doesn't even want to share the cookies, but like she still doesn't want Shin-Ae to leave. And, like Alyssa, very much like Shin-Ae, she hadn't reached that point where she realized it's okay to be a burden, because that is a part of being loved. And like we're not talking about her in this episode, but like that's very much a part of Alyssa's family foundation too. Her family absolutely made being a burden feel like a negative thing, that, like your own father doesn't want you to be a burden. So why are you going to ever feel comfortable letting yourself feel like a burden to, a friend, to the girl at school who's being bullied, whose reputation is sullying yours and making it harder for you to blend into school, who is putting you at risk of your own very private, deep, dark secret being outed? Like, the layers. But like, especially with Shin-Ae, I think that moment where like she finally admits out loud that when she said people suck, she didn't really mean it, that she wanted him to prove her wrong. And when we finally get flashbacks kind of showing us, and getting those secret little glimpses into her life with Maya and Rika and Minhyuk, in between the past and the present, and just getting to see how much she closed herself off, and how much of it was very much like, it was definitely, like she put those walls up. It was very much a matter of self-defense, and it wasn't that it made her happy. That was the only thing that made her feel safe. And it wasn't a matter of something that brought her comfort. It was just that it made her feel secure to know that she wasn't a burden to people. And just getting to finally see her reach that point where she can lean on people and open up and rely on people. And, I like, so much of her and Nol's relationship is very much like, in terms of their marrying, it's very much them unfolding something in each other that has been done to them. And I really look forward to her getting to show Nol the blessing of being a burden.
It really is. It's exactly what they need. Like, they need to be able to lean on each other. They need to be able to let other people help bear their burden. And like, so like, if we think about like, if they weren't to kind of learn this lesson and learn and kind of be able to build these authentic connections and rely on people and like find that form of stability, like, you can see how stagnant they would be. And like they would just be stuck in this place with their walls up and isolated. And it's like, it gives you that kind of temporary feeling of security and relief of the like, I know this thing isn't going to happen to me again. But then it's also like, but isn't the world such a lonely and isolated place with all of these walls up? And so like, to feel that like real security, you have to bring those walls down and learn to open yourself back up and let other people bolster you up too.
Right. The Shin-Ae that we meet at the start of the story is basically who she is if she fails, because she was never, there was never going to be a change in her if there was never, like that whole what am I trying to say? Like, basically she needed some kind of catalyst to cause a change, right? If nothing happened to cause that change, she was going to continue on that very sad and lonely path. And that's the thing, is like, deep down she knew that she was sad and lonely, and she probably was going to get to a point where, like 10, 20 years down the road, she was going to find herself in that point where you start to wonder, like, what's the point of all of it? Because, like, that's the thing, is like, like she's in, I don't think we're going down that direction, but, like, you're kind of in that stage where it's like, even if like she and Nol have like a temporary like little quote breakup, right? It's like, isn't it better to have, like had that experience and have like felt what, what it was like to feel all of that than to have just like continued for another 10, 20 years never feeling any of that? Because, if she had continued like that, you're going to get to a point where it's like, what is the point of living this life if this is all it's going to be? Especially, if we're considering like, continuing with the life of poverty and never really being able to climb out of that. What is your joy in life? What makes you happy, besides little buddy? Because unfortunately little buddy is not eternal. He's not going to be there in 20 years to be the light of her life. Like for Shin-Ae, like being able to come around and realize that, oh, friendship actually is worth the effort, and actually putting yourself out on the line and being a little vulnerable and, like letting people see a glimpse of your heart and being sincere and authentic. Oh, that's actually worth it, especially when people do the same in return for you. Like, I just imagine, had she never gotten that chance to open up, it would just be such a dismal life. Like, look at the life Shimhan leads right now. Like, he's living for Shin-Ae, like he isn't at this stage living for himself. Like, he's finally getting to that point where, like he's trying to get healthy for himself and Shin-Ae, and he's finally like, I want to have a relationship. But everything that he's been doing for like the last 15 years, maybe 12, has been all for Shin-Ae. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I am saying, that is where like Shin-Ae's feelings of not wanting to be a burden is really valid, because there is some kind of very inherent understanding that obviously he does not resent her, like he doesn't resent being, like quote quote stuck with her or anything, but it's also like that understanding that he's never really had that opportunity to live for himself, and he's got a lot of death flags, so it's kind of like, is it too late? But it's just, yeah, that's kind of the thing, is like, I think had Shin-Ae not had those opportunities to actually, authentically open up and authentically live, she would probably find herself in that same kind of situation where, like she's continuing to live in that shell, and it's just like a survival life. She would have just continued as that person who we met. And the Shin-Ae that we met is just, I don't want to say she was hollow, but she just felt, she was sad.
Yeah.
She wasn't a happy person. She was dim, and now she glows.
Yeah, she herself felt empty, and that's the whole thing with the like, I just want to feel okay again. Where like she didn't know how to get there, but she knew that like that wasn't supposed to be it. And
Right.
like I think definitely through Simhan, and also through like what we can see of her foil Alyssa's future, like we can see that like not letting yourself be a burden and not opening up and not forging those connections, like it leads you to such a dismal place. Or like you said, like what do you have other than just like the perpetual goal and hope that eventually it'll get better and eventually you'll have somewhere to go and something to live for, but you're just taking it like one day at a time and not, like you said, like not having anything to be happy about or look forward to.
And
And
she didn't even feel like she had the belief that things would get better.
yeah,
Like, it literally was like, you
like a
just got to
pipe.
get through this day.
Yeah.
And that isn't a way to live. Like, you are going to be so exhausted. Like, we see how exhausted Shimhan is. Like, that's an exhausting life. And that's a topic that we will definitely get into later with Solidarity, but that is a big aspect of poverty and capitalism in general, is that it is just so exhausting to try and dig yourself out of that life that a lot of people can't. But fortunately, our girl has connections.
Ugh. Oh. What a bridge. Let's hope those connections are, not gonna be awful.
Not, life binding.
Yeah.
And one such connection, segue. I feel like I used to try to like find more natural segues, and now it's kind of like become my thing to just like find the most obtrusive segue that I can. Like, this is just like such a glaring segue. Let's go for it.
No, it's great. This is a low rent pod,
You get a low rent segue. Okay, so we've got Shin-Ae, who has spent her life basically living in her own walls. And we've got Nol, who's basically been doing the same thing. But where Shin-Ae has been seeking the sense of just basically wanting to be stable and live her own life. We find that Nol's goals are, he's got some different goals, right, Elle?
Yes. Or like, his goals are a lot more like, I mean, we talked before about like, he is someone who has been really denied the ability to live in general, but particularly like as his authentic self. And so he has also been like kind of perchance with this like burdensome ideology, but it's more in the like, you actively are like you're like this dark like pit that everyone around you will fall into, and it's your fault. And so he like, his goals are like kind of much more about the karmic justice, and like he wants to set right everything that he feels like has been set wrong in the world and like make up for it. But he also really wants to find like some sort of sense of purpose and freedom to live. And deep down inside of him that he doesn't want to admit, because he feels like it conflicts with like that kind of like worldly justice, because he thinks that he himself is a problem. Like both protecting other people and like being allowed to enjoy comfort and accept love in that same vein as like living freely. Like I think like he knows that he has the goal of living freely, but the deeper part of it is that he wants to be able to love freely and like be comfortable.
Right. Like where, for Shin-Ae is very much about like not wanting to feel like a burden is a matter of like independence and autonomy. It's wanting to, like feel like you have a handle on your own life. Nol is more, like that having a sense of purpose and that freedom to live. I think, like they're still very different in my mind, because for him, it's not, like we can argue that obviously he feels like he's a burden, but it's more like he feels like he is a problem. Like we know that Nol believes he should not exist, that his existence has caused others pain and turmoil, that had he not existed, things would have been better. Like, Shin-Ae has never, as far as we have been shown, Shin-Ae has never really gotten so bleak that she thinks life would be better if she didn't exist. Like, like you pointed out, like from a very young age, she had that sense of being a burden, that, like had her father not been left with her, they wouldn't have been struggling. But she never really seemed to have conceptualized it as, oh, if I didn't exist, things would be better. But, Nol has taken it so far as to like, my existence is a blight. And so like that, that, for him, it is very much, I think, a scale where on the one hand, it's that sense of like that karmic justice. He wants to make right like the fact that he exists. But on the complete other hand, he wants to be allowed to exist. He wants to have that freedom to live. Like, I think you could argue on some hand that Shin-Ae has that kind of craving too. But again, like it's not the same in her eyes, like it's not so much that she's ever felt that she wasn't allowed to live. It's more that, like she's just felt restricted by, capitalism, right? For
Yeah.
Nol, it's like he's just not allowed. And so, like for him, he doesn't feel like he's allowed to enjoy existing. He's not allowed to indulge. He's not allowed to feel joy. So yeah, like I'm looking at your notes right now, and just that sense of coming to terms with your own existence is a very good way to summarize that.
Yeah, and like Shin-Ae has kind of said this herself, where like in the hospital, when they're talking about his birthday, and he's basically being like, well, I never thought that I'd enjoy this day because like the fact that I exist is kind of a problem. And she's like, why would you say that? Like, we all love you. Like, life sucks sometimes, but, like, you're not bad for existing. Where, like you said, like, she sees the problems as being centered around her, but coming from an external place. Whereas Noel sees himself as the epicenter.
Right.
And,
like Shimhan has never made Shin-Ae feel like she's a problem. He has ensured that she knows that he loves her, that they are a team, that, this is something that they handle together. Nol has never had that feeling. I mean, like, when he was a child with his mom, but we definitely get the sense that, maybe as he got older, before he lost his mom, maybe things got bad between them. Maybe, like they started fighting. Maybe their relationship soured when they came to the United States of Asia. And that's definitely indicated by what he told her in the hospital room on his birthday about mistreating the cow that became your burger.
And like, I mean, like, especially if the relationship had turned sour, but even if it didn't, he clearly believes that she is dead because of him.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, whether that's something that he came to on his own based on the evidence that was around, or whether that's something that someone kind of instilled in him, like, that is a sentiment that he has. And so, like, that, like, even though they did have that relationship, like, that just drives it in so much more, like you said, mistreating the cow that became your burger. And like I think it was on the rooftop, where they're talking about their own misfortunes, and Shanae's like trying to prod him to open up. Like she goes on that kind of tangent about like, I'm also riddled with bad luck. Bad things happen to me all the time, but it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. Or like she like just again, like she's really bringing in that like the person themselves isn't the problem. They're just like the target of this. Whereas he's literally like, no, like my existence is the issue. If I didn't exist, then all these things wouldn't be targeting me because they're trying to correct the fact that I exist. Like I have created a hole in the matrix.
He sees himself as like a cosmic anomaly that the universe is basically constantly trying to correct.
Yeah, and like it ties in so much to what you were saying last podcast that made everyone cry, about like that again, like coming to terms with your own existence. And like with the way that Nola's living, like he just is very much wrestling between these two realities of wanting to stop being that blight in the world and thinking that, yeah, the universe is right. Like, clearly, it is some sort of cosmic anomaly that I exist in the first place. And, like, that needs to be corrected. And I guess I can't just up and die right now. So I'll do the best I can to make up for it. and that, like, I don't want to have to make up for the fact that I exist. You know, like, I'm here now, and I want to be allowed to live and feel joy and to love and be accepted and, like, have my own life and just exist, be allowed to exist as a human person. And I'm being allowed to, and what did I ever do to deserve that?
Right. And I feel like the worst part is, unlike Shin-Ae, who, she's always had a father who has reinforced in her mind that, she is loved and she is secure, and even though their circumstances are unfortunate, and even though life has not been kind to them, he will always have her back, and he is always going to do everything that he can for her. Nol hasn't had that since he was a young child. Like, his father has never once given him that kind of reassurance, and Yui certainly hasn't, and she saw to it that Kosuke absolutely wasn't going to. So he has this feeling of being a cosmic anomaly, and the very factor, like, the very important people in his life are reinforcing what he believes the universe is trying to tell him. At every turn, his own father, his stepmother, his brother are telling him over and over that he's not good enough, that he shouldn't exist, that he is a mistake, that he never should have existed, that nothing he does is ever going to be good enough. And it's contrasted with these people who he befriended, not even because he actually wanted to be their friend, but because he's just trying to rectify his existence. He's trying to outdo the bad that he's putting in his life, or putting into this world. And then, here he comes to accidentally start caring about these people, and these relationships start to become real. And suddenly, like you said, he finds that he wants to, he doesn't want to be that mistake. He wants to be allowed to have these things. He wants to indulge. He wants to be allowed to have what everybody else has. And even if he is a mistake, it's not his fault, is it? Why should he have to pay for being a mistake?
Yeah, and, like, I think Nola's one who has, like, really interesting trajectory paths, because I mean, like, ultimately that forging of connection and it accidentally becoming real, and him being able to see the pain that it causes when they find out that, it was never supposed to be real, and that, like, those kind of, like, confessions to little buddy where he's like, I guess it isn't really doing good if I'm just, you know kind of trying to check boxes to rectify this cosmic wrong, but feeling like, I get, like, again, kind of how we talked about with Shin-Ae, with, like, feeling the genuineness of the actions of people, where he feels the genuineness of these feelings, and, like, the joy and the pain and the intimacy and, like, the tenderness and the support, and, like, he can feel that that's what's good in the world.
And he wants it.
And
Isn't he allowed it too? Like,
Yeah.
that's that thing about, even if he is a mistake. I can't remember if we ever got you to start reading Operation True Love or not. But I'm thinking of this specifically because the whole premise of that story is that everybody has, like, this love counter, right? Like, how much love that they are going to receive in their life. And basically the main character is an anomaly. Like, she shouldn't exist. And, like, this higher, being is going to erase her if she cannot prove that she is meant to exist. And I keep thinking about that because, like, that's kind of part of her arc, is like, how is it fair that you're going to snuff me out of existence just because I'm a mistake? And that's very much how it feels for Nol. It's like, okay, even if I am a mistake, even if the universe made a mistake, why am I the one who has to pay for that mistake? Why am I not allowed to enjoy the same things that everybody else gets to enjoy? Why do I not get to indulge the way that everybody else gets to indulge?
That absolutely feels so much like where his character is going. Where like you said, like he's realizing that he wants these things and that it's not his fault that he exists. Where like even if he isn't supposed to exist, that he does exist now. And like he should be allowed to make a life out of that. And I like and we talk a lot about like well actually I mean like I don't think on pod talk about, but in general in general talk a lot about like Noel is likely going to be going through this arc where he kind of is seeking vengeance against really like his existence being put down and like seeking to assert himself in the world and like um and that kind of feels like his arc of proving that he should be here like through I guess kind like the more anti-hero vengeful stuff is kind of a side effect of that but like it feels very much like the Noel that we met is the Noel who's very much sitting in that like I am an anomaly, I'm a blight, I should not exist, I can't just up and die, I guess, so I have to like do my best to you know not really throw a wrench in the system, to put out more good than I take bad, and like just try to be unassuming and like coast through life as small and shadowy as I can until eventually I up and die and the universe is corrected. And then he meets these people and he starts forging these connections and he like you said, he feels those things that he wants that everybody else has, and he starts to feel like he should be allowed to exist and like there is a point to his existence, and especially with these people fighting so hard for him where like they're telling him that they want him to exist, that they think he should exist, and like it's so contrary to everything that he's known since Nessa, where like you said, everything has just been putting him down and trying to reinforce that he should not exist, that he really should just lay down and wait to die. And yeah, Solidaritea, like it's like culture shock for him all over again, and it really is, I think.
You
And
know,
then
the funny thing is, I used to be very against the Noel anti-hero arc just because it was the way that people presented it, right? Like, I used to be against it because I always thought that people presented it in a way that skewed who Noel as a character was. But the more that we've talked about it, and especially since doing the Yui episode, the more that I've come to really like it now, because the Noel Yui parallel is what really makes Noel anti-hero work for me, especially in the sense of viewing him as a Yui parallel. I don't think I like it if we just view it as like a revenge arc. I love it viewed in the context of Noel following Yui's trajectory in the sense that, like I was saying, like to me the revenge arc story didn't sit well because it's like that's not who Noel is. I think he would lose himself in doing it. But in the context of, Noel losing himself and, like especially if, Shin-Ae has to, tether him and be that person who reins him back and pulls him back. That's what made me so interested in it. It was what is Solidarity saying? You just watched how a villain can be made. You care about him because you know his story. Now here's Yui's. And that's exactly what it is for me. Yeah. It's the how far are you going to let Noel go in his quest for revenge? Because we know how we feel about Yui. We know where her line is, and she crossed it way, way long ago. So, for me and Noel, it's like, okay, I get it. I know why he wants revenge. I know, like Noel coming around and going from being that character that we first meet who's like, I'm just going to coast by. I just, I want to make myself as small and shadowy as possible until I cease to exist. And then coming to be this character who's like, no, I've changed my mind. I want to grab everything that I deserve. I don't want anybody to push me around anymore. I want to live my life, and I want to live it the way I want. And I think that there's like obviously, I think we kind of talked about this in the Yui episode, and I know that we've talked about this a lot in the Discord in general. So pardon me if any of this is repetitious or if we haven't talked about it yet. But I think that it means, obviously we have a lot of really great room for, yes, the foiling, in the sense that obviously Nol is not going to go as far as Yui, whether or not it's because he's got people like Shin-Ae and Dieter who's going to, tether him and pull him back, whether it's because he himself is going to, catch himself and realize that he's gone too far and this isn't what he wants. I just like the idea of being able to look at them and see that very similar trajectory. And even if he, never goes as far as she does, I want people to be able to see that parallel there and to understand that, even though, yeah, Yui is a terrible person and she's done terrible things, and that it doesn't justify what she's done. It's that same way that we look at Nol and it's like, where's the line that we draw for him? Because, just because Nol has been hurt and he's been denied all of this agency, at what point do we decide that he has had enough? Because that's the thing, right? We want, to some degree, we want him to have that revenge. We want him to be able to take his life back. And it's kind of like, okay, what is the cost of that? What does he have to do to take back his life? Is it enough to, just be able to break free and go and live the life that you want? Obviously that in an ideal world, that would be enough. But, readers are going to want to see some kind of, they want to see the revenge. They want to see him destroy what destroyed him. And then, that's where we start to get into that gray area too, because, we start to look at things like, okay, what about Kosuke? Because you look at characters like Kosuke where it's like he, he's very much at fault for how he's treated Nol, but he's also, he was very much in a murky territory where, he was never able to see the same kind of truth. It's one of those things that I find so fascinating, and I'm really excited to see how Kimchi's going to handle it. But especially with Nol, how I think there is a very, very thin line for him in what is considered like success versus failure. I mean, obviously he has, when we're talking about Nol, there's like multiple versions of what failure looks like for Nol. But I think for Nol, there, his success straddles failure very closely, I think, depending on what route he goes. And assuming the route that we think he'll be going, I think it's all going to come down to how successful he is at letting people love him and letting people, allowing people to embrace him, and if he will be able to accept them that way. If, we get to that point where Shin-Ae has to stop and say, I know you, and I know that this isn't you, and, give him some kind of ultimatum. Is he going to be able to accept the hard love or not?
And I think the Nol Yui parallel is absolutely one of my favorite parallels in the series. Where, like you said, like Solidarity said, watching how a villain can be made and seeing how they come together. And one of the big things with Nol is, like we said, he wants to be allowed all these things that other people have, and he, I think, is going to come to the place where he genuinely starts to feel like he does deserve and is owed these things that he has been denied, which is, if we're right about Yui's past, based on, as we said all throughout the UA episode, that is exactly how Yui felt, where she was born into an existence that was denied because of how she was born, and then she got to this point where she was like, I'm going to take what is owed to me. I'm going to take what I deserve by whatever means I have to. And so it's kind of like, and to a certain extent, their ability to live the lives that they want is locked behind taking it back. where like if Nol were to just now like sit and accept, the love of his friends and start attempting to live his life authentically and independently, Yui would still be right there to shut him down. Like,
right.
where like he does have to respond in some way. And like with Yui, it started the same way where like she was put down in the patriarchy, she was put down in her family, and she did have to, underhandedly fight her way up. And like you said, it's just that like where does the line happen? Where do you get to the point where you are now secure as a person and you don't need to keep fighting?
Right. And especially when you're somebody like Noel, who, like, he, even though he's kind of made himself very small and hasn't necessarily fought in the same sense as Shin-Ae, I think, we can still agree that he has lived his life fighting. So you get to that point where, how do you know when you have to stop fighting? How do you know when you've reached a point of security where you no longer need to do that anymore? And I think that's going to be something for him that he's going to have to reconcile with too. Because I think we're going to obviously see Shin-Ae come into that long before he does. Because Shin-Ae's goals are a lot more achievable, I guess we can say. Or no, let me rephrase that. Shin-Ae is going to be able to achieve her goals more easily than his. Or as at least as far as a timeline goes, hers can be achieved sooner than his, since so much of his do seem like it's going to involve that sense of revenge. Because, like, you're very right that it's not going to be enough to let yourself love, because Yui is always going to be that lurking threat. She needs to be, disposed of in order for him to be able to comfortably and safely allow himself to be loved and to love in return. Whereas, for Shin-Ae, she is, she's starting to reach that sense of stability. Obviously, she's not there, but she's working towards it. And I think when we meet her in the time skip, we're going to see her, much closer to that goal. Whereas I think with Nol, we're going to be watching him work on achieving that goal. So for Shin-Ae, we've talked a lot about how, as somebody who's grown up with that kind of poverty, you never really stop fighting. But I think, as she acclimates herself to the kind of world that Yui wants to, put her into, I think she's going to at least learn the social cues, and she's going to start to learn some of those mental cues, especially if she, uses that time skip to start working on some therapy. I think that will, really help her in the terms of what poverty has done to her. I think therapy will help a lot with that. I think Noel is one of those who, he probably has the most branches for his failures, just because, his mental health isn't the best. And death.
You're really flags trained today.
I mean, and especially because for Noel, it's he's had the suicidal ideation. There's the entire parallels with Rand, and just the promise of, even if he does do the route of make yourself small and shadowy, just kind of coast through your life and try and get by until you no longer exist. That, chains him into a very Rand-like existence where you reach a point of life where you are haunted by your very existence. Especially if it, involves something like getting him trapped to into a marriage that he doesn't want. I feel like Alyssa was probably a special circumstance, and I don't think Rand would, go out and be like, well, he done messed up with a famous girlfriend, we gotta go find him a new one. But, the point being that it would just be one of those very hollow, empty existences, because if you're just resigning yourself to just simply existing until you no longer do, much like with Shin-Ae, if she fails, what are you living for? Literally nothing. He literally had no intention of living, and it's like, if I can't die, I'm literally just going to exist. And as we know, existence does not equal living.
Yeah, and like it, and we've talked. I don't know if we've talked about this in the pod or everywhere else. But
It's that 24/7 brain rot, you guys.
yeah, for anyone who listens to this pod and is like not active in the other I Love You fandom spaces, we really are here 24/7. Which is
if you also have 24/7 I Love You brain rot, like, we're not promoting the server just for, the live audience. Like, as Rose in our audience says, there's a lot of crying.
It's mostly crying.
I mean, if you've made it this far into the pod, that doesn't surprise you. Let's be real.
We just have so many feelings.
So many feelings.
And also lots of cursed memes.
Shh, don't tell them about that part. That's a surprise.
We don't need to out it. We are very sensitive. We have a lot of emotions that really range the whole spectrum.
I hope you still have your thought, though.
I do. Yeah, but we've talked before about, like, it seems very much like Nol at one point did try to take his life and did try to, end it and correct that blight on existence by removing himself, and it just didn't work out. And so, like, the only reason why he's still here now is literally because he just thought that he couldn't leave. Like, he was like, I'm just trapped to suffer in this plane of existence. Like, the universe is punishing me for existing by forcing me to continue to exist while it punishes me.
Also, arguably, Shin-Ae.
Yes, but that came later.
Right.
About pre the pool.
Okay.
Pre-meeting her.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah, where, like, for those, like, several years, like, he was just existing because he thought that he had to continue existing. And, like, we can see how miserable that made him, and how, like, the second that Shin-Ae comes in and offers, like, this essentially reason to keep going, how much he does want to latch onto it and, like, sees all of this that he's missing and how much he does want it. Where, like, if he fails at this and he isn't able to assert that kind of, like, ability to exist, he is just resigning himself to that existence that he had before Shin-Ae came in, but for the rest of his life. And, like, I can only see him growing further and further away from people, like, not even having those, like, connections that he intended to be fake, like what he had with Dieter and Soshi. Like, really just, like, living that life that he had at, like, basically, like, the dinner in the Hirahara mansion, where, like, he's just surrounded by this family who he's not connected to. He's with this girlfriend that is really, like, the relationship is really superficial, and, like, there's just so much distance between everything and literally no reason to be here and keep existing, because, like, we've seen how much, like, with how much Nol does want to have these reasons to exist and to be allowed what everybody else has. Like, I don't think that he would be able to keep existing that way forever if he didn't eventually close him off entirely from it all. Like, no more of that kind of, like, halfway in, halfway out, like he had with Dieter and Soshi, where, like, he's still getting some of it. Not even like what he has with Nana, like, none of it, because eventually something at some point, like, he would keep having that conflict, and
Right.
like, the true failure in this case would be complete resignment to that existence, and, like, living his entire life that way, and I don't think he could get through the rest of his life that way without completely pulling away, which is what he was trying to do, because he was feeling that conflict and it made him uncomfortable, and he tried to pick.
And he failed at that.
Like, God, he did.
This is very tangential, but like when you were talking about that, it made me think about one of those very early scenes when they had gone out to eat. Like Shin-Ae went out to eat with Kosuke and Nol, and they were in the car, and she fell asleep in the car, and he covered her with his coat. And how this is a scene that, you know, I remember personally debating about for a while, and I know it still kind of comes up with readers every now and then, people wondering what it means, how, like, you know, he covered her, and he was kind of looking at her with the Yeong-Gi smile, and then you watch the smile fade away, and then he just turns away and looks out the window, and Kosuke's watching him the whole time. And I feel like that is, like, the best demonstration of it, where, you know, for that moment, Nol is indulging in that feeling of friendship and caring and meaning, and somebody who matters to him and means something, because, you know, that, again, that's that thing about how Nol, so much of Nol and Shin-Ae's very early relationship was very much just them reacting to that very general chemistry, to that very general authenticity. And just like that being a moment of like him truly caring about somebody, and like kind of that moment of realization and understanding what that means and why that's a bad thing, and kind of, you know, like turning away. And it's just like, it's just one of those moments it just really stands out as such a subtle, poignant thing, and how, like, you know, Kosuke's just right there watching the whole thing and clocking it for what it is. And, you know, like, that whole moment of acknowledging that she is, you know, she's going to be a good tool against him.
What a life.
Noel. But, like, you know, like we were saying with Shin-Ae, Nol and Shin-Ae have a very good system of, you know, that mirroring, where, you know, something happens to one of them and they are able to unfold something in the other. And I really look forward to seeing her teach him the art of being a burden, and then watching him go on a revenge quest and foiling his nemesis Yui and losing himself to the darkness.
Yay!
Yay!
But yeah, but I I definitely feel like you said, like, Shin-Ae is going to, like, ultimately the catalyst of everything in his, like, character development has been that, like, wanting and accepting the care from other people, particularly Shin-Ae, because of that mirroring that they have. And so, like we've mentioned it before, but it feels very much like he is absolutely going to start going down that, like, Yui path of realizing that you want these things that you desire, and you have ambitions, and you deserve to be able to live like life, and that you're going to have to take what you deserve because people actively are trying to keep it away from you. And then when he gets to that line, whether he steps over it or he steps just behind it, that Shin-Ae is, like, her kind of, like, her eyes and clarity and her care is going to be what catalyzes him to turn back from fully becoming Yui, and let us see that point at which the villain origin story stops, and, like, what can turn it around. And, like, that is ultimately what is, like, the
that difference between, you know, what he's got compared to what Yui didn't have.
Yeah.
Somebody who cares and can reach out, and, you know, somebody who's going to see their hurt and actually is going to do something to help. Because, no, you know, with Yui, it's like she had this gaping wound and nobody did anything about it. It wasn't even that they didn't see it. It's just that they were like, yeah. So you got a gaping wound. We all got a gaping wound, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas,
Like,
right.
that gaping wound, even.
Right. Whereas like Shin-Ae, she is our compassionate, empathetic, very, very understanding character who, is going to be like, I understand that you have this gaping wound, but this is not going to heal your wound. And you know that. We all know that. And like because this is Kimchi and because this, she's such an authentic writer, we will probably see some kind of tussle there too, where, like maybe it's going to take some scrapping before Nol is actually able to realize what Shin-Ae's actually doing. But I believe that, she's going to get him. It's just how is it going to look as it unfolds? Oh, we'll see. But I do think that will ultimately be something. It's that Shin-Ae's just always been his grounding rod. We keep seeing that as a theme that continues to unfold, where every time we see Nol starting to lose himself to his emotions, every time we see him getting worked up, she has been that kind of presence who manages to pull him out, whether it's just like that simple surprise of her being there. I feel like that is one of those themes that is going to always be there, and we're going to see it in a very big way when it comes to his Yui foiling. And rather that will be like what makes it a Yui foil as opposed to, being a continuous parallel.
One of the recurring themes that keeps coming back in I Love You is that concept of like people need to be loved and accepted and seen and feel connected to each other, but that it's a two-way street, where you have to be seen by someone, but you also have to be receptive to them. And that's so much of the push and pull that we have with Nol and Shin-Ae. We're like they're in that space at different times than each other. And I think like you said with the push and pull of like Shin-Ae being able to kind of have Nol come back from that place, that like we will probably get kind of a tug of war where like she is once again like reaching out to him and he's not quite ready yet to accept what she's reaching out with and be receptive to it. But that,
especially when you're in the middle of like your revenge arc, because it's like, why are you trying to stop me now? Why do you no longer accept this? And especially like now that I'm thinking about it, because like Nol, he's always had that like deep down I'm a monster kind of thing, and it's like, oh, have you hit your limit now, Shin-Ae? Is this the line too far? Am I too monster for you? Delicious.
Yeah, it's like Nol's future arc it's going to be so interesting in the way that it plays out, especially with that like coming from feeling like your existence is unwarranted and like he is a monster and like he just brings bad wherever he goes and it's just like destiny for him to then like flip that on its head and like carry out this and like if I'm a blight and bad in the world, at least like now it's going to like be for me, you know?
Like now it's by choice. Like I'm going to be the monster that you think that I am.
Mm-hmm.
Except that, there are going to be consequences to that. And, it's like, how much are you, because like for him, it's kind of like, yes, this is revenge because you want to take back your life. You want to live your life the way that you know that you deserved to live it. But how much are you willing to lose to do it? Because, like, if you lose your friends and the person that you love in that quest to taking your life back, have you really taken it back at all?
Yeah.
You can't see me, but, like, I got my hands up and I'm shrugging. Because it's part of that, parallel with Yui, is where, obviously, for Yui, she's taking everything that she's always wanted and that she's always felt that she deserved. But she has to do it through means that don't actually bring her any satisfaction, you know? She's got to gain everything through her son, and in order to do that, she has to play that mommy homemaker role that she's always detested and that she never really wanted to play. And it's kind of like, have you really won the game if, you know, these are the consequences of your actions? Obviously for her, she feels like, yes, it's all been victorious and it's all been worth it. But, you know, Yui, she kind of, you know, sees life through fire-tinted glasses. Nol may not see life that same way. And again, I think that's part of the really fun thing about their parallels is seeing, you know, where is that trajectory going to split for him? What is going to be his limit where he, you know, where humanity reels him back in? And, you know, he reconciles with the fact that he was never actually the monster that people made him out to be. And, you know, maybe he's played that role, but is that really who he wants to be? Is that really the life that he wants to lead? Is he willing to, you know, bear the consequences to, you know, go on this revenge quest? Like you said, I think he's going to be a really, really interesting story to watch play out. And I get kind of why people are more interested in his anti-hero arc than, you know, like his Yeong-Gi arc.
And it's like you said, like in regards to Yui, I feel like Yui is one where we can really see that, like you said, that like, what are you winning? Like, what is it all for? Like, and ultimately the, like, where does it end? Because like Yui is someone who realistically, from this point that she is now at, from how long this has gone, how far it's gone, she's someone who is going to spend her entire life fighting. And it's like, when do you sit down and get to actually enjoy what you were fighting for, when you are just fighting until the very end? And like, that part of that foil is that, you know, it's very likely that Nol is going to get to that place where he stops fighting and he's able to walk away with it and enjoy what he has actually won and what he's earned without having to just, you know, go down in that blaze of fire and spend his entire life in that, like, restless, fighting, on edge state.
Right. I think that main difference is going to be that we anticipate that at some point in time, Nol is going to find peace. And that's something that Yui is never going to know.
Yeah, and it's, Bree just said, it's like Rand said, aren't you tired?
And that, right? And like, I was thinking about that when Elle was talking, because for, you know, her response was that no, like, she's just getting started. And that's the thing. Like, she spent this whole time fighting, and now she's like, you know what? We're going to ramp it up. I'm fighting, and we're going to fight more. Something that I'd said on our Yui episode is that, you know, Yui's revenge arc became, you know, it was a revenge story, but it's also that it's like her life is a problem and she made it everyone else's problem. Like, she's clearly gone far beyond revenge. She's at this point now where she's dragging everyone else into this, you know? If anybody has so much as inconvenienced her, they are now a target. And again, that's kind of that thing with Nol, is it's that goes back to, where do you draw that line? At what point do you decide that someone is or isn't your target? And that's part of that concept of peace. Yui can't know peace because to her, she doesn't know where it all ends. There is no end. For her, it's, you've got to keep going, because in her mind, if she stops at some point in time, she's defeated, and she can't be defeated. She doesn't want to be defeated. And, you know, we get it. We understand what we perceive to be her backstory. But for Nol, his goal is different, you know? As long as she is disposed of, he can have peace. For him, revenge really literally is get Yui out of the picture. And I'm saying revenge here, and it's more of just like, destroy what destroyed you. But, you know, because, like, let's be real, as far as revenge goes, he's never going to be able to get, you know, actual revenge. You can't, you know, undo any of the things that Yui has done to him. You cannot do to her any of the things that she has done to him. There's no equal return, right? So for him, it's like destroy her, and then he can actually know peace. I know T pointed this out earlier, and this is something that I've also mused about. Is like going after Yui is punching up. Going after Kosuke, do we consider that punching down? Is that punching sideways? Is that one of those points where, is that a step where Shin-Ae has to step in and say, hey, what are you doing? Because we also talk a lot about Shin-Ae being that bridge between Kosuke and Nol and kind of helping them reconcile, or at least, create that sense of peace. Because again, that question stands is like, how much is Kosuke meant to pay for what he did when, so a lot of what he did and believed was kind of something that was pushed on him that I don't want, like, this is always, like, difficult for me to figure out how to talk about because I don't want to, like, justify him. When I talk about Kosuke and Nol's relationship, I don't want to, like, justify Kosuke's behavior and say that, like, he is not to blame for anything he did, right? Because that's not true. But just to point out, like, those shades of gray where we have to, at the very least, acknowledge that so much of what Kosuke did and said and believed was a direct result of Yui's manipulation, of the commodification of Rand's love, of that desperation, of the way that, Yui's family and that general upbringing of family are, we don't have a normal family. We attack each other and we destroy each other, and how that was something that was instilled in him from such a young age before he knew anything else. And again, I think that's one of those things that Shin-Ae is going to shed light on, is that mentality that, yeah, Kosuke screwed you up and he was horrible, but you can't destroy his entire life for the rest of his life, Like, I feel like that's going to be something that we're going to see.
Yeah, and it's like maybe I'm just bringing this in because I really love 243. But like, I just always, when I think about Nol and his like kind of like anti-hero arc, like I always think about that like kind of preview of it that we got in 243 with Alyssa, where like, is she someone who has caused him pain? Yes. Is she somebody who was actively malicious towards him and understood what she was doing, and that and how he felt, and like that it didn't have to be that way? No. And is his reaction in 243 proportional and necessary? No. And like with Kosuke, it gets more complicated because, Kosuke, he did want to bring Nol down. He was actively trying to cause pain to Nol. But like, Kosuke is already starting to and is going to have this reckoning. And it's like you said, like, is it punching down? Is it punching sideways? But like at the point that Kosuke is likely going to be at, it's probably not punching up.
Right.
Like we saw through 243 that like when he does have that like internal like, people hurt me, so I can hurt them back.
Right.
And like not taking into consideration where that person currently is versus where he currently is, and like whether or not it actually is punching up or if it's punching down. And like Solidaritea just said, if it's while Nol power over Kosuke, in my opinion, it's punching down. And yeah, it's just like that, like the power dynamics between these people change as their circumstances in life change. And like, that comes with like where where does the hurt that you've been caused by these people or other people that you associate them with? Because like we talked about with 243, like Nol is taking out his anger at Kosuke and Yui on Alyssa, and like inflating the amount of hurt that she's caused because she is viewed as being in proximity to these other pains and grouped in with them. And like, just that again, like where do you draw the lines? And when is it okay and when is it not okay?
And I definitely think like Shin-Ae as the grounding rod will continue to convey that, because we've already seen that aspect in her, like part of what makes her a really good, I'm going to call, she's not, but I'm going to call her kind of neutral view. Like she can look at Kosuke and acknowledge that, yeah, he's not a great person, but he doesn't have like the same experiences as us. He hasn't lived the same life the way that we have. And especially if her trajectory is going to be what we currently think it will be, where she takes Yui's offer and she goes to college, which is going to postpone her contract, because like that contract is binding. Like I'm pretty sure if she takes the offer and goes to college, that means she will be completing the rest of her current contract after college, in which case we will see her as Kosuke's assistant again. I think that will give her that new perspective of who Kosuke is and has become, and will help her with, Nol and Kosuke's relationship, especially if we do see Nol punching down. Kind of like, hey, is this the person you want to be? Because, like, this is what Kosuke was doing to you, but, are you trying to be Kosuke, or are you trying to reclaim your life? Because right now you're just being Kosuke, and is that really what you want to do? We've kind of like technically we've gone off tangent, but this is still also like, what if he fails? So
we're not bound by anything. This is our podcast. We can do
it's our low rent podcast, affectionate. And also, like, if we drag this out into 4 episodes, who's gonna complain? Nobody, because we'll delete all of your complaints.
We'll censor you.
No. But I mean, okay, I should have seen this coming because Nol is such a complex character,
Yeah, that's right. I mean we haven't really had this kind of like clustering of character topics in a while. Like we had a Ressa episode and we had a Yui episode, and then before that was theories, and that was one episode that turned into 3.
So also, to be fair, when we get character heavy, we tend to get very character heavy on, like our problematic faves, Kulissa and Yui. So Nol and Shin-Ae, but especially Nol, have really deserved this spotlight. So
yeah, as I was going through and like clipping the podcast, I was like, for like the 2 biggest characters, we really haven't talked about them much. Like most of it was in like what ended up turning into the Stalk You episode.
Okay, so I actually think about this a lot because, like, while I fully acknowledge that I created my brand just in general talking about I Love You and especially Stalk You, I feel like or maybe this is just my own bias, what made me interesting was when I started to really explore Kosuke and Alyssa. And like, so when you started to do it as well, and especially when we started to combine forces, I'm like, honestly, I'm not even surprised that the podcast is so heavily Kosuke and Alyssa. And I think this also factors into something that you said way earlier in the pod about how, Nol and Shin-Ae have such, like, their goals are very external. Like, we see and understand theirs. Whereas Kosuke and Alyssa have so much internal turmoil going on that we wind up talking about them more because you kind of have to. Nol and Shin-Ae, it's very clear and obvious to see. Like, you don't have to dig deep. It's right there pretty much on the surface, maybe a few layers down. Kosuke and Alyssa, you really, really had to dig. And it's only recently that we've been starting to get a lot more about them that we could actually, use to prop up what we were already, talking about. So I'm not actually surprised that we've talked about them a lot, but also that's our brand. They're our problematic faves.
Really is it though. Like I really always view, and I said this earlier in the podcast. I talked about this in the Mirrors and Foils episode. I probably also talked about this in the first 2 episodes. But like I really feel like Shin-Ae and Nol were set up as a very intentional contrast to Alyssa and Kosuke in that external internal thing, especially because I feel like a lot of I Love You is made to make us re-examine our biases and how we perceive other people. And like I said this with like when discourse came up about the fact that we really don't get Alyssa's perspective of the story, and people were like, she would probably be so much less unfairly hated if we saw the world through her eyes a bit and we actually saw her, like, her perspective. And I was like, well, the thing is, in life, we never do actually get anyone else's perspective. We are always looking in from the outside. And it's like, why do we require their direct point of view to understand and sympathize with them when we are being given the clues all around them without it? And it's like we see that so much in the parallels that Kimchi chooses to draw between Shin-Ae Nol versus Kosuke and Alyssa, where like she not only makes that like very kind of easy distinction of like we can see the problems that Shin-Ae and Nol have. They're very external. They're very like the kind of like what we're taught and brought up to see as problems. Like we often have in society this like belief that physical insecurity problems are more valid than your internal problems, when we can see through Kosuke and Alyssa that those can debilitate you way more, honestly, and for longer. And that's
especially with like Alyssa and Kosuke, where that struggle is simply the concept of belonging and being loved, where it's something that we all crave, but because it's what they want and it's seen in this negative light, it's seen negatively. And we see it reiterated all the time with Alyssa, how it's like, oh, she's such a bad person because she craves popularity and she wants to fit in. But like, let's be real. Everybody has at some point in time wanted to fit in. You are lying either to us or to yourself if you deny that you ever wanted to. And fitting in doesn't mean like you wanted to fit in with the popular kids. It means at some point in time you wanted to belong, whether it was like with the weirdo kids or the freaks and geeks or, whatever normies. Like, everybody has wanted to fit in. That is Nol's whole thing, is that he is a person who feels like he is a cosmic anomaly who should not exist, and he still desperately craves allowing himself to belong. And for some reason, Alyssa is seen as being shallow and fickle and a bitch because she wants to be liked. And it's like, but that is literally what Shin-Ae wants. Shin-Ae too wants to be liked. It's just because she covered it with this, veneer of, like self-loathing that it was acceptable for her. And there's so many pointed choices, and you're right. Like, when I dug up that one Tumblr post of mine about, the very obvious mirrors and foils in our 4 main characters, I can't remember how long ago it was, but it was so old that I was still speculating that Alyssa might be interested in Kosuke. So it's got to be like 2 years old.
And this is something that was pointed out again in 243, where like I say all the time, I love 243. It's I should go revise my intro because it's absolutely one of my favorite episodes. But where Alyssa is like, I was so scared, like being the outsider in a new place, and like nothing you do can ever goes right. And like like the irony is that she's saying that to Noel, who very much feels the same way. But we're supposed to draw that like both of those struggles are so valid, and it's like it's just that heightened conflict of the external and like easy to see problems and the internal and hard to see problems. And Kimchi, like she um she exaggerates it by making Shin-Ae and Nol's the perspectives that we really have, where not only do they have the kind of problems that we are already more inherently sympathetic to, already easier to see, that are so externally framed, but we also see the world through them. Whereas with Kosuke and Alyssa, she flips it so hard to where it's that internal, it's well hidden, and like we don't get their perspectives. And I've said before that the way that I view the kind of choice to give more of Kosuke's perspective than Alyssa's, where like I don't know that we will ever truly get Alyssa's perspective. We're getting some of it, but you know, I don't know that we will. And like as much as I do want to see what's happening for Alyssa, narratively I don't even want it, because I view them as like a question and an answer. Where like through Kosuke, she shows us exactly how our perspective of other people can flip so much by just seeing inside of their world and seeing their point of view and seeing what their view of the world is, what their needs were, what their fears are, what they're trying to do, and the difference between their intentions and their impact and how their world falls around them. And we're supposed to beg that question of if if seeing if seeing into Kosuke's world can make me change the way that I view him so very much, where else might this happen? Who else might this happen for? And I view Alyssa very much as the answer, where we don't have her perspective, but through her body language, through the parallels between her and the other characters, through reading between those lines from her, through picking up the clues on that outside perspective, we can see that the answer is everywhere and with everyone. Where again, we do not get other people's point of view. I will never see the world through Ashley's eyes, but I can understand other people by looking around them and reading into their reactions and trying to think, what might it be that they see.
Right. And it's just, like you said, the paralleling is so intentional. And that's the main thing that I want people to see. I will once again, for like maybe the fifth time today, repeat something that Ren in our Discord server said, where it is, you do not have to like those characters, but you have to, at the very least, see that depth and that nuance in them. You know, like, you may never like Alyssa as a character, but you know, people have to at least be able to acknowledge that what she is seeking and craving is not attention, but she is seeking and craving the security, that she is seeking and craving that concept of belonging. She has conflated the concept of being liked with being loved. She sees this, you know, she is told that there's all of these fans, these people who love her, who love the song she wrote, this authentic part of her that she put, you know, a part of her soul that she put into. We have seen the flashback that reveals A, she doesn't like K-pop. B, she doesn't even find being able to dance or, you know, perform to be something that's impressive. C, what she does find impressive is being able to write music. So she has fans who love her, who love this music she has written, something she's proud of and she wanted to show off. And she has conflated this because we the readers know that is, you know, fans will never truly unconditionally love you. Fans are never going to know who you are. When we love an artist, we love a projection, an image, an idea. Like, I am a K-pop fan, and I fully acknowledge that I do not know any of these artists. I love this projection, this person that they have convinced me that they are, but that is not the totality of who they are. But Alyssa, she doesn't have that because she is on this quest to be loved for who she is, and that's really what it is. And like, people look at her and they go, well, she had that in Shin-Ae and that she threw it away. And it's like, yeah, but like, we have to look at those circumstances. And like, once again, we have like completely gone off tangent. But like, that's that thing with Alyssa. And again, the whole point of this was that we never talk about Nol and Shin-Ae because we get so deep into characters like Alyssa and Kosuke. So I will stop us here because we do have a whole segment where we will talk about Kosuke and Alyssa, and I don't want to give away all the good stuff. We're gonna be good and save ourselves.
I want to say one more thing though.
Okay.
Okay. Just to kind of hint like on that like external internal thing again. It also like it ties back to what we were talking about with existence, where like something that I've been saying recently is that like the Kosuke and Alyssa parallel is about their identity and their ability to be allowed an identity, where they were both promised love at the end of something else, where Kosuke was never allowed to find who he is and was channeled into a specific mold and promised love at the other end, while Alyssa knew exactly who she was and wasn't loved for it and was pushed into morphing into the mold to be accepted, where both of them are really feeling that they aren't allowed to have an identity. Whereas Shin-Ae and like the Alyssa and Kosuke are allowed to exist. They're allowed to exist in the world, but they're not allowed to exist as themselves. Whereas Shin-Ae and Nol do feel like they're allowed to be themselves, but they don't feel like they're allowed to exist in the world.
I love foils. And that's the thing, too, is that they have what Kosuke and Alyssa so desperately want. And Kosuke sees it all the time. He has told Nol. Like, he wants to be liked, authentically liked. He knows that nobody likes him for who he is. He thinks even Hansuke doesn't like him for who he is, and that he is obligated to love him because they are family. He wants to be authentically loved, and he thinks that nobody has ever loved him, because it's true. Nobody has ever loved him. And, like I said, Shin-Ae has never doubted that at least her father loves her. Even though she got, things got so dire that she started to wonder if maybe even, Minhyuk, was faking it. Like, she knew it wasn't true. It's just, those were her doubts speaking to her. Like, she and Nol may not have been allowed to feel like they're allowed to exist. They have always felt like the universe is punishing them. But they have always had that love. Okay, Nol hasn't always, he was born with it. He was born with that security. He had that love with his mother. And his friends are working so hard to prove to him that, he's allowed to be loved. And even if he's not going to let them love him, they're still going to do it regardless. Like, Shin-Ae fully took her walls down for him as a result of all of his efforts. And, I love that foiling so much because, like you said, I really do think so much of I Love You is about being loved and letting yourself be loved and loving in return. And, that's something Kosuke has never done that. And I really hope that is going to be a part of his trajectory. And I know we talk all the time about how I don't think the brothers will ever actually be able to be brothers, but God, it doesn't stop me from hoping.
The what ifs.
The what ifs! Like, even, like, us starting over, okay? Like, I just, that moment when they were all out to eat dinner before Eugene came by, when Shin-Ae was, you know, talking up about their hot daddy. It's just, that is like the moment that I want for their future, where, you know, Nol's just sitting there like, I mean, I think Dieter's mom's hot, but I'm not gonna say it. And Kosuke's just like, oh my god, will you shut up? That's the brotherhood I want for them. Like, they don't have to be like close, they don't have to be like chummy, you know, like they can bicker for the rest of their lives. I would love for them to bicker for the rest of their lives. Actually, please, that would be wonderful.
And it's like, they want that so badly too. Like,
right.
That's what we've both been searching for, and that's why they're so antagonistic towards each other. And it's like, it again kind of like comes back to that, like, these resentments are bred when you are looking for something that isn't being provided, and when you don't see through the other person's eyes, where like you don't understand why you don't understand why they're reacting the way that they do, and you are searching for something else in them. And we see this happen with so many of the characters, and it's like, I yearn for the day when they can all see each other clearly and like get, like we said, like come back to that, like, be loved and give love. And like when everybody, this is now me like ending on a pipe dream, but like everybody being able to find their authentic selves, to be their authentic selves, and be safe and happy and loved within their authentic selves.
I think ending on a pipe dream is very Trashellie of us, because we know Kimchi is never going to give us a pipe dream, but it's never going to stop us from hoping.
We can dream and we can cry.
We are nothing if not bundles of tears and pipe dreams.
We really are.
Much like a crafts store. Or Michael's, because we're definitely not Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
We know who we are.
And we exist in this world.
Yeah, and we exist to be loved. Oh, cool. T wants us to cry even more. Okay, so I'm really interested in seeing how they're going to be in the future, because obviously Nol is not going to be in any position to wanting to, you know, trust Kosuke. And I think, frankly, Kosuke is going to understand that. I think part of Kosuke going through it is going to be, you know, obviously the role reversal where Kosuke is trying to make himself small and shadowy, because he knows that why would he even go begging for Nol's, you know, attention when he knows he's undeserving of it? Because that's that thing about Kosuke, right? Is that part of what makes the, you know, his arc so painful is he does show remorse for this. He, you know, he shows that he truly feels horrible about what he's done, that everything that he thought justified everything he was doing was all a lie, was all manipulation, was, you know, like, as he's reconciling everything and he's realizing, oh, you can't reconcile any of this. And it's like, he's the one who's going to become that hollow husk of a man. So it's kind of like, I can't even see him reaching out. It's when we say Shin-Ae is going to have to bridge them, I think, like, we always, like, add that disclaimer that, like, we're not saying that we think Shin-Ae has to do emotional labor. It's just that she's going to be the conduit between them. But now I'm like, oh my god, is she going to have to do emotional labor? Not like, you know, like forced into it, but because she's like, oh my god, I need you two to like fix yourselves.
I think I do think it's going to be way more so the conduit, but I like with Kosuke, like I think
there's gonna have to be a catalyst, right? Like, what can possibly be the catalyst that convinces him to try?
I honestly, I don't know. And like that's the kind of like the thing where like there's some questions about I Love You that I can't answer. And
hold on, I just had a thought because of T. Because TA says that she needs to work on her sibling issue, right? And then like we've had all of these, like, people keep saying that Kimchi's basically been saying that, like, the Shin-Ae relationship would be a lot harder to repair than Nol and Kosuke, which makes everybody go, like, impossible. So if it's that Shin-Ae and Shin-Ae are so irreparable, that would be, like, good, you know, like, reason for Shin-Ae to be like, stop being dumbasses, you two fix this, like, you know? Like,
Honestly,
it's not like a solid thought, but, like, you know, especially if, like, Shin-Ae, like, if it's right that she's going to be back, you know, she's finished college, she's back to being Kosuke's assistant, she's, you know, even more assertive than ever, she has, you know, she's been through some therapy, she's a little more sure of herself, she's got a little better idea of things, and, like, she can look at Kosuke and she can be like, dude, what the fuck happened to you? You fell apart. And, you know, like, realizing that, like, his life has just fallen apart and so much of it is a result of everything that went down, and just being like, you guys gotta fix this. You know, like, I actually really like that idea. That, like, if it turns out that Shin-Ae and Shin-Ae, like, it's so impossible to repair that, because that's been such a running theme, is that, you know, Shin-Ae's old life cannot, you know, she cannot have her old family back. They cannot, you know, especially, like, if her mom is truly dead. But even if she's not, like, she can never have that old family back. But, like, Kosuke and Nol, you know, like, if it's not as irreparable, you know?
like, we have talked before about, like, the Yu sisters do feel very much like a foil to the relationship
Mm-hmm.
with Kosuke, where, like, they, you know, they are blood siblings. They were raised together in their early years, and then they were separated. And when they come back, like, they're strangers, and,
Right.
like, there's, and it seems like Shin-Ae especially, like, feels kind of entitled to Shin-Ae in a way that she isn't actually, because, like, just because she is blood family, where, like, we see through Shin-Ae that, like, she views Minhyuk as way more family than Shin-Ae, and she affords him a lot more leeway because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, he is the one that was actually always there for her. Whereas the, like, with Nolan Kosuke, like, they weren't raised together. They're not blood siblings. They, like, they were shoved together instead of forced apart, but, like, they did live this whole life with a brother relationship. Like, was it like all fine and dandy? No. But they did, and they have been brought up in that, and we're like, there's honestly more potential to repair that than the sisters relationship, because there is a relationship there to repair.
The
And
fact that Noel wanted to be that brother, Kosuke secretly deep down did want that. Like,
yeah,
that was the most authentic relationship he's ever had in his life. And, you know, we see that he clearly regrets ever screwing it up. Like, I genuinely think that there really is something there. Like, I know that we've talked a lot about the foils, but I never actually sat and thought about it being something that could actually be the catalyst to Shin-Ae being like, you guys are stupid. Let's don't throw this away. Because, you know,
yeah,
that is something that we've seen for Shin-Ae, is that especially too because she has lost important relationships. So in, you know, like, securing her friendship and, you know, relationship with Noel too is just like, it's those layers of it where it's like, don't let important people get away. It's like, was Kosuke a horrible person to you? Yeah, but are you going to hold that against him forever? That's for you to decide. But, you know, if it were me, you know, this is what I would do. Like, I don't think she's going to, like, do the emotional labor of, you know, going through all of the emotions and stuff. But I do think that there's definitely something there of just kind of pushing, you know, kind of, like I
yeah.
said, you know, like, if it was me, this is what I would do.
Yeah, like the brothers have to do the work, but she is most likely going to make them see that they can do that work and that they want to do that work and that perhaps they should.
Yeah. Because like I know we repeat it a lot, and at this point I don't know if it's just like my blind hope and naivete or what, but I just want to see the reconciliation between the brothers. I want to see that peace, and I want to see them be able to exist in the same room together and, you know, be content with each other. And I do think that ultimately that's where we're going to go. Like, I don't think, unless, you know, Nol is dead in a ditch, like, you know, T keeps telling us, I don't think we're going to see the story end where Nol and Kosuke just go in separate directions and never look back.
I agree, and I think really we do have a lot of hints to this throughout the story. Like the relationship between them is so emphasized, and like I mean, we see with Shin-Ae as the main character, but really the relationship between Nol and Kosuke is the main character of I Love You. And like we just people bring up the potential of the two of them being brothers all the time, and the two of them, like the language between them is so pointed in their flashbacks, in their present, about like that desire to be brothers and like that active destruction of it. And like with, you know, and like you were talking about where like Kosuke is probably not going to reach out because he has lost the right to, like that, like like the defeatism and like dismal expression in him when he was at that convenience store and hearing talk about her brother, and like she asked, "Do you have any brothers?" and he goes, "I don't."
No.
And that being on top of such such sad wet cat Kosuke panels, and the way that it like frames straight back to like I have to believe that this is like they have to tear it down so that they can rebuild it. And like we are in that broken part, but that so much of the story is about their relationship ultimately in the end being something like
and maybe that ties into Nol's, you know, revenge arc and going too far. It's like maybe that is that point of humanization of either you become a monster or you step back and you remain a human and you reach out to the monster who, you know, made you. And in this case, it is being able to look at Kosuke and acknowledge that, you know, you are part of what broke me and undid me, but I also acknowledge that you too were a part of that cycle that was being manipulated, that you too were being abused in this situation, and that while what you did actively harmed me and actively made me want to die, being able to reach that point of being able to realize that, hey, I'm able to separate these, and maybe, you know, maybe that is that kind of moment for him.
And like to tie it back again, like that ability to see through Kosuke's eyes and like feel something similar to what Kosuke felt, where like Nol will probably feel like he needs to destroy people more than he actually does in order to maintain his own security in life, which is the feeling that Kosuke had. Like he didn't actually need to destroy Nol that way, but he felt like he did. And like
Right.
we like whenever we talk about this, like there's always that clarity of like that there is no obligation to forgive and mend and move on.
Mm-hmm.
But the point that makes me think that they will is the fact that even now, even like as we're seeing this relationship so actively disintegrate, even with all of this harm that's been caused, even at the point they're at now, they both still want that authentic brother relationship. And it does feel like they would heal so much through that. Where like it's not them forcing a forgiveness and reconciliation, but that it does actually feel like it is what they want. And I think especially because I think they will be able to see each other clearly, and like I think there will be particularly from Kosuke, like a lot of reconciliation and reparations about what happened in the past, and like the acknowledgement of why it happened and how it wasn't okay, and the effects of that tied in together with that continued desire to want to be brothers and to mend and to understand how everything ended up the way that it did, and want something better and want what you originally were looking for.
You had mentioned something about like Kosuke's eyes, and how I was just thinking about like Nol having that moment of realizing that, you know, like coming to terms, having a moment of realizing that he has become Kosuke, destroying everybody in order to stay on top. And how, even though I always say I think Shin-Ae will be his grounding rod and will be the person who tethers him to humanity and who he really is, I also really love the idea of him being able to, you know, catch himself, and the idea of realizing that he has become Kosuke, because as much as, you know, like he will be on that Yui parallel, we have also talked about how he's got those Kosuke parallels setting up right now. We have already seen it in how Alyssa went to him in her most, you know, her darkest hour, her most vulnerable moment of, I just need somebody, and I need somebody who makes me feel safe. The same way that Nol went to Kosuke because you're the only person I have. And, you know, he turned her away. And how he is definitely going to have his moment where he finds out what had really happened, why she went to him, and, you know, realize that he turned her away after she experienced something like that. And he's going to have his own, you know, sitting on a public floor, hugging a, you know, disgusting public toilet moment of, you know, just self-loathing and realizing what a horrible person he's been. And like, obviously, I'm not saying he's a horrible person, but just like feeling like that, you know, the same way that Kosuke has realized he has turned away people who genuinely went to him in need of help. Nol having that moment where he is able to see how it happened to Kosuke, how Kosuke became a person who was destroying him so that he could stay on the top, and, you know, be able to step back from it, and, you know, like, I guess it's that, you know, that way of being. I think that's how he'll be able to make his peace. How he'll be able to make his peace with Kosuke one day is that, you know, you end up on that path where you're becoming Kosuke, and it's like, oh, that's it, you know, like T said, you know, like you become that villain, you know, like the same way he's paralleling Yui, you parallel Kosuke, realizing that, you know, Kosuke isn't this monster who was, you know, created. It's just, he is a person whose circumstances turned him into that person, and that Nol too can become that kind of person. And so, yeah, I think that might be the kind of thing that will help him reconcile with Kosuke, because like you said too, I don't necessarily think that anybody absolutely has to forgive. And I think, and maybe others won't agree with this, but I think Nol can probably find his own kind of peace with Kosuke without necessarily having to like forgive and forget, because I think you can make peace without doing that. It's kind of, you know, like, this happened and I get it, and I understand why it happened now. But we're past it now. We're going to move forward. This is a new start, maybe, you know?
And
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. And it's like, it doesn't go away. Like, the things that happen to you, like Noel even said, like, the things that happen to you, they do stay with you. Like, they formed who you are. They, like, as much as you have moved past them, like, they're still a part of you. So yeah, it's never going to be that like forgive and forget. It's, you know, it's like it never happened. But I do think that it's going to be like we can make a new peace with each other.
Right. And I look forward to it.
I as well.
Yay.
Yeah. Are we good?
I think so, which is so funny because I'm looking at our outline and I'm like, imagine
It's not that.
But no, you're right. I think Nol and Shin-Ae definitely deserved having a whole episode where we got to mostly talk about them without Kosuke and Alyssa completely derailing them.
When we brought in Kosuke and Alyssa, it was largely like it was.
We've got to show the foils.
Yeah, it was still often through a lens of like understanding.
Sorry.
Like oftentimes when we bring like those parallels together, we're using Nol and Shin-Ae to understand Kosuke and Alyssa, and I think we were doing more so the opposite, where we brought in Kosuke and Alyssa, but it was still from a perspective of understanding Shin-Ae and Nol.
To quote my favorite Anon message I've ever received on Tumblr, it's all about the parallels, and it really is.
I said like, before, that is Kimchi's language.
You have to look at these mirrored pairs in their pairs, but you also have to look at them in the context of their foils, because that is like the whole purpose of foils. And because we've been asked about this, I will go ahead and speak about it. In terms of mirrors and foils, mirrors are just basically parallels. But I think specifically in I Love You fandom, when we talk about mirrors, we specifically mean a parallel in which the two characters reflect something in each other. Nol and Shin-Ae are very good examples of this because they reveal something about themselves to each other. We see that in, them through how, like, Shin-Ae tells herself that people suck and she doesn't care about them, but she really yearns to actually be close to people. And how, Nol tells himself that he is a mistake and he doesn't want to have, like, these real connections, so he forges fake connections, but he's actually craving real connections. They have that mirrored experience between them. We see it with Kosuke and Alyssa in that they have that very similar internal turmoil where they are craving that feeling of acceptance and being loved. Kosuke especially wanting to be loved by Rand, Alyssa wanting to be loved for who she truly is. They both want to be loved simply for who they truly are. Foils are still parallels. So there has to be that same similar basis where at some point in time they diverged. So for instance, when we're talking about how Nol looks like he's going to be on a parallel path to Yui, he will probably be following her trajectory, and how he has felt that he has been denied something that he believes he deserves, that he wants, and he has decided he's going to go take it by the reins, and it's going to lead him on a quest for revenge, likely. But where Yui cross some kind of line where her revenge stopped being revenge and she's now been taking it out on everyone. At some point in time, Nol is going to be confronted with a moral dilemma of, at what point in time does revenge end? At what point in time are you now hurting people who really you shouldn't be hurting anymore? So foils, are meant to reveal something in the other character, but like back and forth. So in this case, it would be like Nol has people who care about him. And, that's something that Yui didn't have. And that's probably going to be one of the big differences that will prevent Nol from becoming Yui, is that he has people who care about him and are going to be able to look at him and say, look, I see you and I get that you're hurting, but this isn't cool. Nobody could do that for Yui. We see Alyssa and Shin-Ae foiled heavily, and very much in the same way as we do Kosuke and Nol, where, as Elle was talking about, where we have one who has very external problems versus one who has very internal problems. One where readers are able to, at a glance, see their problems very readily and easily, whereas the other one hides it and it's not as visible. Or it's not something that readers necessarily see initially as an issue. And Kimchi utilizes mirrors and foils so much. We've talked about mirrors and foils on the podcast. I trust that Elle will put the links in the description so that you can go and look at those as well. Mirrors and foils are my favorite element of I Love You, and I truly believe you cannot look at the characters without, looking at their mirror or foiled pair, just because it illuminate and highlight is the same thing. It illuminates so much in who they are, what motivates them, what their fears are, what is holding them back. Elle has even come up with like a fantastic parallel with like Rand and Alyssa, which is delicious. Painful, but delicious.
Oh, it's so painful.
But I'm pretty sure we talked about the difference in mirrors and foils on those episodes, but I know people have been asking about this on the Discord as well, so I figured we can throw it out there just because we've been talking about this a lot again. And I genuinely believe that this is why whenever we talk about Nol and Shin-Ae, we bring up Alyssa and Kosuke and vice versa. It's not because I feel like we have to compare them, because I feel like we saw this a lot, especially with like shipping debates where, like people would bring up Alyssa because, oh, she's a really bad girlfriend. And like there is something to be foiled there, especially in the fact that Alyssa, did not see Nol in the way that Shin-Ae did. But it wasn't like in a, oh, she's a terrible person kind of way, even though that's kind of, like how it reads. As much as, like that is the difference between those relationships and why, Shin-Ae, we see Shin-Ae as somebody that Nol grows towards because she sees those things that Alyssa doesn't. There is that authentic relationship there, whereas what he has with Alyssa is a fake relationship. You got to compare things. It's just, once you start comparing characters, like for me, like I know I've said this so many times before, but for me, it was the moment that somebody pointed out that there's a lot of times where Yui would mention Alyssa to Kosuke and how, like Alyssa seemed interested in Kosuke. I'm like, I want to take note of that. And when I started rereading, that's when I started noticing how they were paralleled. And I was like, oh, there's something here. Like I said, like when I first noticed that, it was so long ago that I still thought Alyssa might be interested in Kosuke. So clearly pre-flashback, pre-Alyssa's a lesbian. Woo! But it's like Elle was saying earlier about the question and the answer, and how we are very likely never going to see the story from Alyssa's perspective, and if we do, it is not going to be until much later down the road. We can glean a lot about her through what we know about Kosuke, but likewise through what we know about Shin-Ae, because foils, those mirrors, the foils, it's all so good. Like honestly, once you start comparing them, you can't stop.
And it's just like you said, like both mirrors and foils are bred out of a place of similarity and a place of parallels. And so being able to highlight where are these things the same and how do or don't they diverge and why are they the same and why are they either going to stay the same or become different, and come at it from just a perspective of understanding. Like if there's anything at all in essence to be gleaned from anything that we say, it's that all of these characters are designed to be understood, and like just taking out our own feelings, taking out our perspective biases, taking out our biases from our life experiences, like just let ourselves understand who these people are and how they became who they are, and like the differences sometimes between their internal world and their internal world, the way that the world perceives them, the way that they exist in the world, and just looking at all of these characters through these different lenses, and like ultimately these mirrored and foiled pairings are so much lenses to look at each other through, and like
it's that why that is so important, I think, because it's not enough to like look at the similarities and differences, but like you said, it's questioning why are they so similar or different. because like you can trace a lot of my interest in Kosuke and Alyssa through my Tumblr, because like you can find my really early entries and message answers from when I was first starting to examine them, like before I was like actually enjoying them as characters, when I was just kind of like, I want to dig into them and really start to see more into them, when I was kind of looking at them as characters who, yeah, appearance really matters to them, and you know, this is still a very true fact, but it was not like the sum of who they were, and I hadn't quite figured out why appearance matters to them. Why is their image such an important factor to them? And how, like, just as I started to dig more into them, and as you start to dig into, okay, so why is this image so important? And, you know, like, especially for someone like Kosuke, like, obviously, a lot of that has to do with, like, you know, his upbringing, but especially because image is very important to Rand, and if it's important to Rand, then it's important to Kosuke. And obviously, part of it is that as more of the story was revealed, we started to see more of who Kosuke was, and as we learn more about who Kosuke is, of course, you start to learn more about who Alyssa is. And again, like you were saying, that whole thing about, because Alyssa's perspective is so withheld from us, we have to glean into what we know about Kosuke. And especially because they are the characters who have so much internalized and so much of themselves hidden, we have to be able to glean that from Kosuke. And again, the foiling through, you know, Shin-Ae, where it's like, okay, if Shin-Ae feels and sees things this way, then why does Alyssa view things this other way, kind of stuff. It's just, Kimchi does such a good job of it. Like, it is so incredibly well done. It's, you really can find the parallels everywhere. Like, once you start looking, it's not even like half-assed where it's like, oh, this kind of seems like a parallel, but I'm not sure about it. No, like, they're there. I remember one of my favorite things to write about was like Nol and Minhyuk as parallels, in terms of like being, you know, these figures in Shin-Ae's lives who are like protective of her, but in these very different ways, and just like how they did it differently and what their motivation was. Oh, that was a fun one.
And like, it's just like one of our server members, hi, said it's about understanding who they are as they are and seeing them fully. And Kimchi is really giving us the tools to do just that.
And yeah, it's just, I think that's the biggest thing for me, is I want people to get that about Kimchi's writing. That, like, we talk so much about like unfair criticism and stuff, and I know it sounds sometimes like we just ride hard for her, but like, it's very deserved, okay? Like, the writing is so well done in that regard. Like, she's given us all of the tools. Is she, you know, like, serving everything directly to us? No, not usually. And if, you know, your deal is that you want to be, you know, served everything directly, then okay, I guess I get why I Love You isn't your thing. But, you know, if you really like to dig into things, I Love You is so good for digging into.
It's like she wants us to have to think. Like you said, she's giving us all of the tools, but she wants us to learn how to use them. And it's like, ultimately, like, not that I'm going to put intentions in Kimchi's mouth, but like, I love you very much, and I say it all the time about examining the way that you look at the world and the way that you process and your biases. And so she's giving us all of the tools to see what we need, but she's forcing us to re-examine how we look at things in order to rectify, you know, these are my biases. This is how I see the world. Like, this is what may be warranted and this is what may not be. And this is what I have to let go of or utilize in order to properly get what I need out of these tools that have been left. Because if you're not going to kind of put in that thought work and to really re-examine how you perceive things and your own biases and all of these parallels, then you're going to be leaving tools sitting on the table because you don't know what to do with them.
I said earlier today that at this current time, I think Kosuke and Alyssa are my favorite characters. Um, and if you look like 2 years ago in my Reddit comments in my Tumblr, you will see that I vehemently hated them. I loathed them. I was getting angry at Kosuke all of the time because of just like the things that he would say and the way that he treated people. I was seeing Alyssa at her surface, and I thought that she was somebody who was really wishy-washy, who was hurting people, and didn't care about how she was hurting people. And then, I sat down and I took the tools that Kimchi gave us, and I started to really dig into them and to really look at them. And now they are my current favorite characters. Maybe that will change when we get to Nol's revenge arc, but I feel like we're going to just get to a point where they will all four be my favorite characters, because I can't see myself getting to a point where Kosuke and Alyssa will ever stop being my favorite characters, just because there's just it's the nuance and the layers, and I know we're going to be seeing that with Nol coming up. Obviously, like, Shin-Ae and Nol were at one point in time my favorite characters, so it's not that, like, I stopped liking them. It's just that the more that I got to examine Kosuke and Alyssa, and like you said, kind of throw away my own biases and be like, oh, this is why I felt this way about Alyssa, and kind of confront those inner demons, especially because Alyssa, much like Maya, is one of those girls, one of those characters who is to me, very real, because insecurity and like needing to fit in and needing to be loved are just such very viscerally real and human experiences that people want to deny. Like, the number of people that I have seen in discussions about Alyssa just deny ever wanting to fit in, deny ever wanting to belong, deny ever, doing something that Alyssa has done. And, like we've said so many times, what is Alyssa's actual greatest sin? Like, what has she really done that was so wrong? And that was what it was for me, was like sitting back and realizing that Alyssa has never like actually done anything wrong, and she's been demonized for the very things that I feel so strongly. Like, middle school me just so desperately wanted to be liked. Middle school me put up with some of the worst people because I thought it was going to fill that void of being liked. And like that continued to haunt me like into high school of, you accept shitty friendships because you think that, maybe at some point in time it's going to become real. Maybe at some point in time it's going to feel good enough. And you figure out it's not. And, like, we know that Alyssa's kind of at that point because now she is lying to herself and she's deluding herself. But she's being demonized even for that. And I think that's what made Alyssa so important to me, is the fact that she is demonized for something that is so real and human. And I want people to be able to see that in themselves and just acknowledge that what really is the true harm of just wanting to be safe. Because, again, like, I know we said we're not going to get into this about Alyssa, but that's ultimately what it is. She wants to feel safe. She wants to be liked for who she is, but in a safe way, because she believes that no one can actually like her for who she truly is, because she herself doesn't seem to be able to like who she truly is.
And it comes back to being so poetic for everyone who doesn't see Alyssa, because so often, like you said, the things that she's being demonized for are things that are just inherent, innate human needs, and the people who demonize her for them feel that very same thing, and it's very likely that when people kind of demonize these characters for certain things, that it is a reflection of something in themselves that they are uncomfortable facing. And like that's not true for necessarily our characters who have engaged in criminal activity. But like especially our main quartet, like it's those things that are so very human that is so difficult to confront that ultimately gets them demonized. And like you've said before, like we all want to see the good in the characters and believe that we are aligned with them, and we want to see, you know, what we perceive as the bad or the negative in characters and believe that we could never be like that. But the thing is that all of them are so human, and they have us in all of them, and there are parts of them in all of us. And you know, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's not all positive. It's not all, you know, the hero. You know,
Right.
it's complex, and it is emotional, and it is human.
I think that's why I love so much that Shin-Ae is our protagonist, because we've been shown that she is the character who gets that. And that's really remarkable, given that she is the character who has longed so much to be accepted by people and has never really had that until now. But it's the way that, you know, despite everything that went down between her and Alyssa, it was her ability to look back at that and say, you know, I don't know the whole story, so I don't really know what happened there. It was the way that, you know, she finally called things out with Maya and accepted that, hey, this wasn't actually all Maya. I actually had a hand in this. My inability to trust her and open up and, you know, return friendship means that I prevented this friendship from ever growing. And, you know, like we already discussed earlier in the episode how they were getting in the way of that friendship ever having that opportunity. But the point being is, you know, I say all the time, every time, Shin-Ae is a light, and she is always going to shine that light on people. And I think she's going to be able to find those good qualities in people, in the other characters. And I think she is going to be the character who helps us see that. Whether or not readers actually take that message, obviously remains to be seen. But I think as our protagonist and the character through whose eyes we see the main story, I think she is a fantastic character for that, in her ability to, you know, see the good in characters who have it. You know, if there's good to be seen, she's going to find it. Obviously, not all characters have good. I'm talking to you, Gun Kim.
But like coming back to like Shanae's, like her own needs and her own outlook, like she very much is that character, and so much of why she sees herself as a burden is because I said this before about Alyssa, but it really applies overall, that she doesn't see the people who have created hardships in her life as bad people, because she sees the good in them. She sees them for who they are and all of those parts of themselves. And that includes the things that are good about them. That includes that they're trying their best and they're just doing what they can. And that sometimes the best that you have just isn't enough to get a good outcome. But
like the only resentment that she really has against Alyssa is that Alyssa is Nol's girlfriend.
her jealousy, and
that's it.
And that she couldn't understand.
Right.
That she doesn't know what it was. And like she struggles so much with that internal feeling of being a burden because she knows that the causes of harm to her aren't bad people. We're like, does she see herself as a burden to Yui? No. But like, does she did she solidify that idea of being a burden after Simhan struggles, after Alyssa struggles? Does she like have conflicting feelings even around like Nol and Dieter? Yeah, because she is in situations where there is harm being caused, but she still sees the good in the other person. And so since she hasn't let herself unpack the actual emotions and reactions she's had, since she's detached from them and compartmentalized and put them all away. She has to find somewhere to direct that hurt, and she's directing it towards herself because she doesn't feel okay pinning it towards other people because she knows that they're not bad people and that there's good in them. And like that, when she does unpack all of these things that have happened to her and her reactions and how her feelings are valid, even though those other people aren't bad people and they weren't trying to hurt her, when she gets to that place where she is kind of able to do her best to understand or to accept that those doors have closed, or both, that she will then be in that place to really be that person who sees and shines a light and brings out that good through everyone else.
And see, I feel I literally just got through saying that I know I just said Alyssa and Kosuke are currently my favorite characters, but they all are. We know that.
We know that. Whole main quartet. There's so much in that main quartet, and like, just total up all the podcast minutes that we spent talking about them, and then all the words that we've written about them. They parallel each other. They foil each other. They all show us something about ourselves and about other people. They're also very human, and they all have so much in them, and especially when they're with each other.
Right. Like, the thing that I just say this all the time, the thing that I look forward to, but the thing right now that I really look forward to is seeing the Kosuke, Shin-Ae Nol trio as like a power trio. Like, seeing them team up, because we know it's going to happen at some point in time. Don't quite know how we're going to get there, but seeing it happen is going to be so good. And God, I would love for Alyssa to be a part of that. Like, I want Kimchi to surprise us and prove us wrong and throw a curveball that we do not anticipate. Because, like, I've contemplated so many different outcomes for Alyssa, like well beyond before she even became a character that I loved and cared about. We've talked about how there's going to be the inevitable downfall, right? There has to be, because she is Kosuke's mirror, and we know that Kosuke's obviously he's having a downfall, but we know that Kosuke has to have a downfall, which means that Alyssa has to have a downfall. We've talked a lot about the, potential of bullying allegations, especially if the girls who were involved try to, pin it all on her, because it would just be the perfect opportunity to take her down. And how I would love to see Shin-Ae reach out to her and just, oh God, I'm about to cry. I would love to see Shin-Ae reach out to her and just, very authentically be there for her and, be that person who she needs. Because I feel like in the same way that Kosuke is, Kosuke needs somebody who's going to be there for him when he is in that, like, very vulnerable stage. Somebody who's going to be like, I need to pull you out of this mess. Somebody who can be that for Alyssa. I know that we've thrown out the likelihood of Alyssa being outed, and as in, like, thrown out, like, we don't think it will happen, and God, I really hope not. But I have contemplated that before, and how I think in that terrible, awful outcome, it would be so wonderful if Nol and Shin-Ae both reached out to her, especially because I think for Nol it would be that moment of understanding, like, why their relationship was like that, why she was like that, and why it was something that she could never come out and tell him about. Like that feeling of being used and finally understanding that it was never, like, maliciously using him. But, like, I just, in the same way that I want that Nol and Kosuke reconciliation, I so badly want Shin-Ae and Alyssa to have that peace. Like, I want Alyssa to know how much she meant to Shin-Ae, but I also want Shin-Ae to know how much she meant to Alyssa. Like, even if she never knows about the crush and the feelings, like, I want, like, I've said before that, like, so much of Shin-Ae's abandonment issues or feeling like she was tossed away without a second thought, by people, that like she was just so disposable and that people were able to just like toss her out without a second thought. And I want her to know how much she has meant to every person who has ever tried to walk away from her, because I'm sure like it wasn't an easy decision for her mom. I mean, I've got to hope it was, right? Like I've got to hope that her mom struggled with it. But I want her to know how much it meant, how much she meant to Alyssa and how difficult it really was.
And like,
I want it.
And like I've said before, that like the thing with Shin-Ae is that she has all these abandonment issues, like you said, because she like thinks that she feels like it was so easy for these people to throw her away, and that they did just throw her away. But the reality is that the reason that these people are throwing her away is because they care so much about her, and because they feel like they have to throw her away because it's so difficult to be without her, and like because they care and because they're afraid of how much they care about her.
She is so important and she means so much to people, and she doesn't even know like that. So like I guess we've never like sat and viewed it this way, but like that's definitely like a trope that Kimchi is playing with, is like the trope of like the main character who is so important, and like she's always like the most bland, boring character, and it's like, why is everyone so obsessed with this girl? Except with Shin-Ae, we get it. We get why everyone's obsessed. We get why she means so much and why people latch onto her. And like you said, like they have to throw her away because that is the only way that they can like move on. And like obviously they never move on. Like, did Alyssa actually move on? Like, that sweater would not make her feel so many feelings if she had been able to move on and if she'd made peace. Like, I can't remember if it was you or somebody else who said it. I don't think it was me, but like talking about how when she was talking to Yui about the sweater and how
it was me, I think.
See, it probably was about how seeing Shin-Ae, she's like, oh, I thought that she was okay and at the formal and she had moved on. And like she's clearly projecting because she's talking about herself, because, she's saying that she thought she was okay and that she had moved on and that she was over Shin-Ae, and she is the one who is not over her, not in the least. Shin-Ae still affects her and gets under her skin, and seeing her there like that in that sweater and how it just got to her. Oh,
I say all the time about Alyssa that like she would not be anywhere near where she is without Shinlissa. And like it's so clear that she has not moved on from that, and that like her relationship with Yeong-Gi is a projection of Shinlissa. Her isolation comes out of Shinlissa. Her being targeted by Yui came out of the Shinlissa event. Her being an idol, the trajectory and life path that she's about to go on, it all comes back to the fact that Shinlissa happened and that she has not at all moved on from it. Neither of those girls have ever had closure or ever been able to move on from that event. And like it just it kills me.
Right. No, like I get it because that's exactly it. Like, because at least for Shin-Ae, she is getting some do-overs, like she lost Alyssa and she never got that closure, but she at least got Minhyuk. And even though Rika and Maya weren't like close friends, she still had them. Like that moment in I'm blanking on the episode, but when she and Maya were talking about what they like about each other and their friendships, and seeing those glimpses of them and the kinds of friendships that they had together, that meant so much to me. But Alyssa's never had that. And like Shin-Ae now has Dieter and Soshi and Nol, and Alyssa doesn't have that, because even though Alyssa had Nol, she never had him. Like, first off, she had Yeong-Gi, and we know what that was really like. And like you said, the projection, because like, listen, that when that panel where we saw young Shin-Ae smile for the very first time, doing the Yeong-Gi smile, like it was like a kick to the gut. It was like, oh, like the puzzle pieces just clicked right there. Like even before, because we already know the fallout, obviously, but like in that moment, we knew. And just Alyssa never got that closure, never got that chance to heal, and she never got that chance to fill the void. Like Shin-Ae has at least been able to make friendships that kind of make up for what she went through. Alyssa's never had any of that.
Like I said, it kills me. And like just going back, like our main quartet, they're so well written and their stories are so intricately woven. And like they reveal so much about each other and so much about the world and so much about us and so much about the story. And like we could go on forever. But like it's just it's so woven and it's so well written and it's so good.
And Alyssa is definitely like a character who I definitely came to love in the sense of like, because of Shin-Ae, I came to love Alyssa so much. Because Shin-Ae has illuminated her. Because again, we probably aren't going to see into her head. Everything we know about her is what Shin-Ae revealed to us. And we got to see her the way that Shin-Ae saw her. And Shin-Ae saw her as like this really cool, interesting person. And that part hurts too, because knowing Alyssa, that's probably something that she secretly still carries in her heart. Like, again, Shin-Ae was the only person who ever carried that. Oh,
And
we gotta put fast pass tags in the
it'll
chapters.
Be
That's it.
Yeah, in the timestamps, I'll put a little warning.
It's okay. This whole time that we've been sitting here talking, I didn't even know like if this was actually going to go into the episode, because it's like, we've kind of gotten way off topic, and it's like, is this going to be stuff that's going to get cut?
And the worst part is we have a script, like it's not a script, but we have outlines and they tend to be very long and we just don't use them. Like, I mean, we do use them, but we don't use them enough.
And then we just like kept circling back. I'm like, I stay in. And then I'm like, oh, well, I cried, so we're going to have to keep that in.
I keep being like, when are we ending? And then like one of us says something, and then we're like, yeah.
The pipe dream. We're gonna end with a pipe dream, and then we got real deep. Typical Trashellie.
Typical Trashellie.